Great, thank you. Well, good evening. I'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order. Today being August 4th, 2020. We're starting the meeting at 7:07 p.m. I hope everybody is well, you and your families during this time. And I know we have a pretty important meeting tonight, and I wanted to make sure we get into all these important topics, certainly. Before we begin, I did have some notices that I need to read. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the public can access the meeting via live stream. In addition, the events will be immediately broadcast on PBD Access TV, PBD Channel 8, www.
I'm going to jump in here as the vice chair until the mayor can come back on. Obviously, we're experiencing a technical difficulty with the mayor's transmission. I apologize because I don't have the actual language in front of me pertaining to the governor's rule. However, this meeting is public and there will be a number provided for people who wish to call in during the public participation section of our agenda. And we will discuss that as we get closer to that during our meeting time. At this time, I would like to request that everyone please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. We have the June 22nd, 2020 budget meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve June 22nd, 2020 budget meeting minutes.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Ms. Harris, if you could do that for us.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympia?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
I'll vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay. All right. And next is the approval of the minutes for the June 30th, 2020 regular school committee minutes. Could I have a motion on that one?
Motion to approve the June 30th, 2020 regular school committee meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Arnott. Any discussion? Being none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympia?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There are no bills attached with this month's, with this agenda, so we'll move on. Continued business. Just to report on the MSBA Higgins project, we are still in closeout. And there are a couple of small things being completed at Higgins, and those will be brought forward to you very shortly. Second item on continued business is the FY20 budget updates. And Dr. Vidala, I leave it to you and Mr. Scanlon. Do you have anything on that at the moment? Or I know further down in our agenda, there'll be a budget update of the fiscal 21, but please feel free to speak if you have something on the 20 budget.
I know Mr. Scanlon is working closely with the city to make sure that everything is closed out for FY20, and I see that Mr. Scanlon can jump in.
Okay. All right. Mr. Scanlon, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. We're working on the closeout of the 20 budget, which, believe it or not, involves the 19 grants that they're at to their 2-year period. And the 21 budget is up and operating, and we've not heard any issues so far in 21. We should be done with 20 relatively soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee members? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. The next one is the Welch School MSBA project update, and I'm very happy to let you all know that today Dr. Vidala and I met with the MSBA selection panel. They interviewed two of the proposals that were submitted, and after two very nice presentations, a discussion ensued and a vote was taken, and the selection was made. It is a selection that the city of Peabody agreed with and that we wanted, and Danisco Design is going to be the designer for the Welch School project. So you're hearing it about 6 hours afterwards, and there will be more to come, but this is a big milestone in the process. Truly having this completed today is very good, because if we had to wait for the next meeting, that would not take place until October. So we are still on a very aggressive schedule for completion of the feasibility study and being able to move on and really get busy with the repairs and all of the work that's going to go on at the Welch. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, thank you. Right now we have the public participation portion of our meeting. Oh, Mr. Miko, sorry.
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Dunn. Through the chair to the committee, I was wondering if there would be any opposition to move up the superintendent's report, because it looks like it's a lengthy presentation, and maybe some of those questions that would be asked during the public participation could be covered on this. Could we move this up in the line?
Actually, Mr. Miko, I was going to ask the same thing, because I think it makes sense. I know a lot of people are really, really anticipating all the information that Dr. Vidala and the staff are going to provide on the reopening of the schools. And as you said, many of their questions may be answered in this presentation. So if there is no problem with that among the committee members, we'll just switch the order and do the superintendent's report first. Any objection to that?
No objection.
All right, thank you. Dr. Vidala, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. So on the superintendent's report, the first item is the reopening of schools, and there are a number of items underneath that. And so the presentation will cover all of those, but I wanted to put all of these items in overview of the process, results of our surveys. A draft of the reopening plan will be discussed, and the additional considerations of the calendar, facilities and operations, transportation, alternative childcare, and food services will all be included in the presentation. But I wanted to put them all on the agenda so people had an overview of how the presentation would go, and then if we have any questions after the presentation, I would be happy to answer them. So I will share my screen. Give me 1 second here.
And Dr. Vidala, is your presentation is it the written document, the PowerPoint and everything?
It's the PowerPoint, yes. So I will share this. Okay. So tonight we'll be talking about planning for the reentry and the recovery for the Peabody Public Schools. It has certainly been a difficult year for Peabody, and I want to make sure that I really address the needs and the concerns within all of our members of the community. And as we look to figure out what the fall will look like as we re-enter our schools, recovery means a lot to the Peabody Public Schools and to the community of Peabody. So I really wanted to consider the recovery of our community with our reopening plans. As I've stated several times, in returning to school, our goal for the fall continues to be the safe return for as many students and staff as possible to in-person school settings so that we can maximize learning and address our students' holistic needs. Over time, we've talked about this two-step process for reopening that has been set forth by DESE, and that's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. First, they asked us to conduct a feasibility study and submit a brief overview by July 31st of what we thought was feasible, addressing 3 models of learning: a full in-person model of learning, which is what we typically have seen in our schools prior to COVID-19, a hybrid model, which would include some in-person and some remote, or a full remote model, similar to what we experienced from March 13th through July 25th. And the second step is a comprehensive plan that would be submitted by August 10th. So tonight I'll do an overview of the process, how we've gotten here, and make a proposal to our community of what I think a realistic reopening could look like in the fall. And then we'll discuss the next steps, which will include a public comment on our document and on our proposed plan before we finalize the plan for August 10th to be submitted to the department. So first, we conducted a feasibility study. And the feasibility study was to determine whether in-person learning, a full or hybrid model, would be feasible for the Peabody Public Schools. So as part of that, we conducted a family survey, a faculty and staff survey. We had our principals and their building teams look at the capacity of our buildings within the guidelines that were set forth by the Department of Education and the CDC. And then we formed reopening committees that we've talked about previously. The district has a reopening task force that meets Fridays, and we discuss policy and communication. We've created a larger working group of subcommittees that are addressing specific needs in the district, and then each school has a school-based reopening team. The results of our family survey included over 3,100 responses, which represented over 4,500 students. It was an incredible response. We got 77% of our students represented. Nearly 70% of our families want to return to an in-person model of instruction 5 days per week. If we did go to that model, approximately 25% of families would choose to go remote versus the full in-person model. We asked families about a hybrid model, which I understand is confusing, and we hope to flesh out some more information about that tonight. But within the models that we presented, families did prefer a 2-day-a-week model or a half-day model over a week-on, week-off model. And we'll discuss that further as we go in. Through our survey, approximately 1,200 students require transportation. 98% of families have reported that they do have internet access, and that included the paper copies that we did send out to families. Approximately 25% of our families would need to access meals if we went remote or hybrid, and we'll also address that as we move forward. Additionally, we conducted a faculty and staff survey. We received over 631 responses, which represented 456 of our teachers, 111 paras, 48 administrators and district employees, and 15 administrative assistants. We asked questions of whether people would feel comfortable returning to in-person learning 5 days per week if we had 3-foot distancing or 6-foot distancing guidance. And it was staggering, the difference. 61% of our faculty prefer in-person or remote with 3-foot distancing, meaning that almost 40% of people would prefer to go remote if we went with the 3-foot distancing guidelines. However, if we looked at the 6-foot distancing guidelines, 80% of our faculty and staff would prefer full in-person learning or remote learning, with only 20% preferring the remote model. We also asked about the hybrid model, and our faculty and staff did prefer the 2-day-a-week model or the half-day model over the week-on, week-off. And so that was consistent with both of our families and our faculty. And we really feel like a whole week on and a whole week off doesn't give the teachers enough touch points with the kids and enough contact. So that is something that we definitely wanted to take into account. Additionally, approximately 20% of our faculty reported that they have childcare issues if we went remote or hybrid, and that will be addressed as we move forward. And finally, one important metric that we looked at was 80% of our faculty indicated that they will return to work full-time in all models. Next, we looked at the capacity of our buildings. First, we looked at physical capacity, and we found that with 3-foot distancing guidelines, we could return 100% of our students to the buildings. If we went with the 6-foot distancing guidelines, we could return 50 to 60% of our students. And taking into consideration other issues such as the DESE guidance on classroom configuration, arrival and dismissal procedures, transitions between classes, mask breaks, food services, transportation, and collaboration with the Peabody Health Department, we found that 6-foot distancing guidelines would be the recommendation. With all those other configurations and the logistics around arrival and dismissal, transitions in between classes, we felt as though the 6-foot guidance was one that we really needed to look at. So as we look at these the 3 potential learning models that the Department of Education asked us to look at, the first one being the full-time in-person learning model, we really needed to consider all of the logistics around it, not just the physical space. And so at this time, the Peabody Public Schools has determined that it cannot safely return all staff and students to a full-time in-person instruction at this time. It's simply too difficult with the in-person learning with all of our students around arrival and dismissal and the physical distancing requirements to safely return everyone back to school right now. Therefore, we are looking at a combination of in-person and remote learning, which would be considered a hybrid model or a fully remote model. As we decide what that looks like, I wanted to show a brief video that helps us understand what the doctors are saying. We can't make these decisions in isolation. And so it is important for us to consider, what the medical experts are saying.
When we look at how things are going related to COVID-19 in the state of Massachusetts, we actually have a lot to be optimistic about.
We've done a phenomenal job of getting our rates of transmission down. We are viewed around the country as a leader in developing strategies to reduce the spread of infection. Getting our kids back to school is really only safe because we've gotten the rates of transmission down to a low level, low and continuing to drop. If we were in another state, we'd be having a different conversation. There will be important measures that are going to be implemented at each individual school to make sure that kids stay safe, kids and teachers. One of them will be social distancing. We're going to keep kids apart. We're going to rely heavily on the use of masks, which we know are highly effective at reducing transmission. We're going to rely on hand hygiene. We're going to really require children to be washing their hands or using hand sanitizer frequently over the course of the school day. So one of the most important things that parents and families can do to support safe return to school is ensuring that they're only sending their children to school when they're well. Every day, we want parents to ensure that their children don't have any symptoms that could be a sign of COVID. We know that classrooms are going to look different than they did last year. They're going to be configured in a way that's going to maximize the safety to both students and to teachers. The first difference that will be noticed is that the desks are going to be spaced further apart. We know that not every classroom will be able to achieve 6 feet of distancing, and that's safe provided that children who are in those classes, as well as the teachers, are wearing their mask. In addition, they're all going to be facing forward because we know that sideways transmission is rare. And with those strategies in place, distances shorter than 6 feet can still be done safely.
So because of what we've learned about the virus itself, we feel comfortable that the plans that have been outlined are a safe and effective way for our children to return to school this fall.
I'm an infectious disease physician, but I'm also a mom, and there is nothing more important to me than the safety of my kids. I really believe that we're putting together strategies that are going to protect our kids and the educators in the classroom to make it safe for them to go back to school. My children are going to be going back to school in the fall, and I am really confident that they're going to be fine.
So in considering the rationale for an in-person learning model, one thing that we know is that remote learning cannot replace in-person learning. We found from the spring that remote learning has its issues. And we know that we'll do a better job next time, but it still won't replace in-person learning. Schools have become more than academic institutions for many of our families. So a fully remote model for all learners will create inequity. What we'll find is that many of our families will not have the same access as they would to an in-person learning. And we need to make sure we're really looking at our vulnerable populations. Many of our specialized service deliveries cannot be done remotely. And these include some specialized special education services, as well as services. Another rationale for considering an in-person learning model is that 80% of our faculty prefer to return to an in-person model when we do the 6 feet of distancing, as well as 75% of families preferring in-person learning. One thing that we do need to look at is the cases that are happening right here in the city of Peabody. One thing that we know for certain is that our 14-day positivity rate is down to 1.79%. We've done a good job of addressing these concerns, and we need to continue to take a look at our local context as we make our decisions. Some of the outcomes that are important. This graphic here on the left shows the outcomes for our children ages 0 to 20 in the city of Peabody. There have been 54 cases. 50 of the children have fully recovered and 4 remain active. If we look at our healthcare workers who are on the front line, we've seen 172 cases in Peabody, and 168 of those, or 98%, have fully recovered. There are currently 4 active cases. We do know that the virus impacts specific populations of people in a very different way. We know that, unfortunately, Peabody has dealt with several deaths, especially in our adult living facilities. 75% of the deaths in Peabody have occurred for people over the age of 80, and the vast majority are for people with existing health conditions and who are over the age of 60. Therefore, the proposal that I'm making for the Peabody Public Schools in the fall would be a hybrid model with a remote option. We would ask families to choose between the hybrid option or the remote option. In the hybrid option, students would engage in school 2 days a week and would be connected virtually on the other days. We would split the students into 2 cohorts. Cohort A would be in school on Mondays and Thursdays. Cohort B would be in school on Tuesdays and Fridays. Wednesdays would be reserved for a fully remote day. We'd be able to clean our schools. We'd be able to engage with students one-on-one through individualized conferencing. We would also look at selected populations which may attend school in person 4 days a week to receive additional supports. Those students would be students with disabilities who are on IEPs, English language learner students, or students who have other individualized needs or cannot connect remotely. We also would want to offer an option for any of our families who do not feel comfortable returning to school in person, and they would be connected virtually only. What we want to do is create a model that provides options for our families and our staff so that we don't have a one-size-fits-all model. We want to make sure that we address the needs of all of our community members in a holistic way. I would also recommend a phased-in approach. We would begin with phase 1 from August 31st to September 11th, where we would have professional development and training for all of our staff. This would allow our staff to effectively plan for the implementation of our hybrid model, which will be described a little bit later in the document. And then on Monday and Tuesday, September 14th and 15th, I would propose that we would have a relationship building and time to establish routines. During this phase, we would begin by establishing routines for learning, and we would distribute materials, including Chromebooks for students in K-5. One thing that we are proposing, and I'll address this again later in the document, is this distribution of Chromebooks for all students, grades kindergarten through 12, that would be school-issued devices. On these first 2 days, we would look at opportunities for students to meet their teachers, to see their classroom, and to visit the school in a safe and appropriate way. These would be individualized and by appointment only. I would like to take a look at this in terms of making it very similar to a kindergarten screening model or a meet the teacher night that would happen during the school day, where we could really train people on how to use the devices, and we would be able to give them the Chromebooks so that then they could take them home and be ready for this hybrid model. September 16th would mark the first day of school for students. On that day, we would begin implementation of our hybrid schedule, or in some cases, the full remote learning option if families choose to engage remotely. We will continue to focus on relationships, routines, and resilience, building stamina and community connections throughout this hybrid model to ensure that kids are still engaged. Finally, a full in-person model, or the new normal, we would anticipate that that would be phase 4 in conjunction with phase 4 of the governor's plan. And that's when we bring all students back and all staff back with our increased health and safety measures. If we see a spike in the model, we could flip and go to a full remote learning model, but we would want to make sure that we start in person and train people on the phases and routines in order to make sure that we can address those needs. As we prepare for the remote learning or the hybrid model, we want to make sure that we welcome kids back through this hybrid model with all students in K12 being provided with a school-issued Chromebook. That will address a major equity issue. In addition, as was noted in the video, we'll make sure that staff and students in grades 2 through 12 would wear face coverings or masks. We would practice safe physical distancing using the 6-foot guidelines that are outlined by the CDC and that have been endorsed by our Department of Public Health. We would encourage hand washing and sanitation, as well as encouraging families and staff to stay home when they are sick. An example of the hybrid schedule, Monday through Friday, would be as follows. If we look at cohort A, you'll see in-school instruction on Monday and Thursday, as well as asynchronous, which would be videos or independent personal learning on Tuesdays and Fridays. And then on Wednesdays, we would have opportunities for synchronous or face-to-face virtual instruction with their teachers, as well as check-ins and conferences with families. Our cohort B students would be in school on the Tuesdays and Fridays, and they would receive their in-person instruction on those days, as well as the virtual model on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Finally, cohort C would be those selected populations where we'd be looking at an in-school instruction 4 days per week. So if they were part of cohort A, they would be in the classroom on Mondays and Thursdays, and they may report and see a special ed teacher or an ELL teacher in a small group on Tuesdays and Fridays. We are addressing their needs as well. In terms of the remote learning model that families could opt into, again, all students would have all students in K through 12 would be provided with a school-issued Chromebook. Students will receive virtual synchronous instruction, meaning live instruction with the teacher for a portion of the instructional blocks each day. They would also have assignments that would be done individually at home. Classes will be held every day that school is in session, as outlined by the school calendar. And students will receive ongoing feedback, assessments, and grades in the remote learning model in the fall. ESL and special education services would be scheduled synchronously with a teacher throughout the day, and they would be provided with direct instruction as required to meet the state guidelines. Attendance will also be taken every day in the remote learning model. Sample schedule for remote learning model would begin with tech help and announcements, and we would look to do a community circle with our students each morning as a check-in to see how they're doing and to address their social and emotional needs. We would have whole group instruction in ELA or math, which would include mini lessons, and then there would be time for students to complete work independently and teachers to conference with small groups of students. They would also receive a snack or a movement break each day, and then we would continue with either the other academic block of ELA or math, continue that with another movement break, and then we would have a closing circle. At the end of the day, students would have a break, they would have time to participate in a writing workshop, And then they would do the last hour of the day would be remote learning, where they could engage with specialists or do some science and social studies activities, and the teacher would have time to plan and prepare for the next day. One thing that we definitely want to address is alternative childcare options. We found that many of our staff and our families would have some childcare concerns if we went to school remotely or in the hybrid model. So we are currently exploring partnerships with 4Kids Only, the Public Library, the Metro North YMCA, and Pasos Avante in order to provide childcare options for students who are home during the remote days. So on days when they're not in the building, we would be looking for space in the city, and 4Kids Only or the YMCA would provide childcare options for families throughout the city. Their staff would support the remote learning that our teachers would be providing. This would be a fee-based program. It would be open to Peabody students and the children of school employees, and we would continue to seek subsidies to offset the cost for families if it's needed. Remote instruction would be delivered by the Peabody school employees, both synchronously and asynchronously, and it would be supported by FKO or YMCA staff members. As we prepare for the fall, we consider several things with our buildings, especially in our facilities and operations. We have completed updated cleaning and sanitation protocols, and we've done an analysis of the air quality and HVAC systems. Those will be contained in a larger document that will be shared tomorrow morning and posted on our website as we look for an open public comment. We've considered our food service operations, where we'll provide breakfast and lunch every day. It will be available every day for students, whether you're in person or remote, through a grab and go or an on-site food delivery system. Finally, we looked at transportation. We'll have additional safety measures in place, which will limit the number of students who are on the bus at a particular time, and there'll be enhanced cleaning protocols that will be implemented. We will conduct a transportation survey in order to identify the needs of students who would need transportation to and from school. So in terms of next steps, we'll have a draft of the reentry and recovery plan that will be sent out for feedback. We'll have an open comment period from August 5th through August 9th. We'll be sending a transportation survey and registration, which will begin August 7th, and a final plan will be submitted on August 10th. Families can choose the hybrid model or the remote option. We'll provide a link to a registration or to a request, and we ask families to make that decision by August 21st. And then additional information will be provided at the school committee meetings on August 18th and August 25th. So with that, I will stop sharing this portion, and I will open it up to questions from the committee.
Well, thank you, Dr. Vidala. I'm happy to be back at the meeting. I've been listening in. I had to go to a new location. I was having trouble at City Hall for some reason with the reception. And so I am back, listened in on the presentation. Thank you for that. I imagine there's a lot of questions and comments. So I'll open it right up to the school committee now. And who would like to speak first?
Mayor Betancourt, I just want to mention there are over 100 attendees, and if any of them do want to come in after school committee comment, they would need to raise their hand so that they get popped up to the top of the list. There's a little hand raising option on their view that would allow them to come in and speak during the.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lord. And yes, I want to make sure, we'll make sure that you and I work together to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard that is called in. And we're going to open it up to the school committee. So Mrs. Carpenter, I'll go to you first, please.
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Vidala. Thank you for that presentation. It was very thorough. I appreciate all the work that everyone put into coming up with this plan, which I do think, given the current circumstances, is a good plan as far as good can be with what we're going through. I think today and in the past weeks, a lot of us on the committee have received emails, text messages, phone calls from a lot of parents and staff members. And I wanted to address one of the issues that I kind of went back and forth with today with somebody, and it was in regards to the preschool program. are they falling under the same plan? Specifically like the McCarthy and Passos and all, and the West, how is that plan going to work?
Yeah, so Passos has indicated to us that they will follow our schedule with whatever schedule we look at. There is additional guidance to prioritize preschool students. In terms of our integrated preschool, because there are different time on learning requirements for preschool and they're less restrictive, we have considered a 4 or 5 day a week, half day only model for some of our students, which would probably be in the case of our role model peers. Some of our students with special education needs would need to attend full days, but we would look to try to minimize the cohorts, and we would be looking at our integrated preschool potentially going 5 days a week for 2.5 hours in the morning, and then 5 days a week for 2.5 hours in the afternoon. And so we're still exploring what that would look like, but in terms of our preschool model, we would be looking to try to bring kids in for shorter periods of time, more consistently, either 4 or 5 days.
Okay, thank you. And another question I had is if maybe you can go over kind of how like occupational therapists will work, gym, music, art, all of those type of things.
Sure. So the related service providers for special education would be different than the specialist teachers or elective teachers. So I'll address the related services first. So if we are in a hybrid model, what we would try to do is schedule time for the kids. If they were, say, in cohort A, where they would meet on Mondays and Thursdays, we would try to schedule their time for them to come in on Tuesdays and Fridays to receive their occupational therapy or their individualized special education services. So what we would be looking for is that it would not be from their face-to-face time with their teacher. It would be time on the other days. And so those would be the kids that we would prioritize to come in 4 days a week, the kids who receive those special services. For the specialists or the elective type courses, art, music, health, and PE, there is some guidance that says that could be done remotely. And then there are other models where we could do classroom instruction with the physical distancing around more academic or more wellness type activities. If we are in a full day model, we would use those teachers to instruct our students and give our classroom teachers their prep periods at the younger grades, and even through some creative scheduling at the Higgins Middle School with their exploratories, or the high school with their electives. So what we would look at is more classroom-based activities, not sharing any materials, but having more wellness instead of phys ed where they're running around. We have to limit the amount of singing and band type activities with woodwind or brass instruments. And we'd follow those guidelines, but we would want to still honor our specialists. We do value the arts, and we want to expose kids to as much of the arts as possible. So we would be looking to try to accommodate that in, maybe a little bit of a different model, but do some face-to-face and some virtual instruction in those domains.
Thank you. Okay, so we are looking to keep those programs some in some fashion. Another question, and I know my committee members have a lot more, so I'll yield after this. Are we looking at any type of wellness screening before staff and children enter the building?
So at this time, we would not be recommending that all staff get tested or all students get tested. That the guidance has been that we do not require that level of testing. What we would be doing is working with our families and working with our nursing staff to ensure that people aren't coming to school sick. And we would be, if students aren't feeling well, we would be taking their temperatures in school on a case-by-case basis, but we wouldn't be taking a temperature of every single student every single day.
Thank you, Dr. Vidal. I appreciate all of this information. It was a great presentation, and I'll yield at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. We'll go to Mr. Olympio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Vidal, for this very thorough presentation. It was very informative, answered a lot of the questions that I had, and I'm sure I'll have a few more as we go through everything. But just a couple of things off the top. That Wednesday remote day, I mean, how many hours of actual live instruction could parents expect for their children, let's say at an elementary, middle school, and a high school level? Is it 3-4 hours? Is it, if you could give a little more insight on that?
Yeah, so the recommendations that we've got would be a full school day.
Okay.
And so it could be different depending on the age level and depending on the needs of the children, but that would be a full school day. We would expect people to be engaged for a full day, and there could be creative opportunities to do one-on-one conferencing with families, to do health and wellness checks, to do definitely direct instruction, but that would be an opportunity to bring both cohorts together and be able to do some more connections with kids across both cohorts. So they might be remote, but we'd be able to engage them together, provide direct instruction, and then provide students with time when they were doing independent work, and then the teacher could conference. So it would be expected that it would be a full work day, which was different than the guidance that we got in the spring, where it was about a half work day, where we would be expecting full work days every day.
Okay, great. That's wonderful. Now, how about so students that are part of the co-teaching program, how you would anticipate them going to school 4 days a week? Would that,
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So we would look at 2 days of the inclusive opportunities and 2 days of the small group instruction with the specialized services.
Okay, great. And I mean, is it going to certainly be on a case-by-case basis? But let's just say there's a couple of students or a couple of faculty members that test positive. Is it the 14 days that they're going to have to wait? Would you anticipate something shutting the whole school down, or a day to clean? How would that work in theory? Because I would imagine that's going to happen.
Yes, there is comprehensive guidance around it, and it's a little different for each scenario. And this physical distancing really helps in this case, because what they're looking for is if you're within 6 feet of someone for more than 10 to 15 minutes, then you would need to, if somebody tested positive and you're within 15 minutes, you're within 6 feet of them, you would need to quarantine. The summer guidance was 14 days. The fall guidance looks like it's 10 days, but I would defer. Anytime we have a case, we would engage with the public health department, and we would make sure that we're engaging with them. We're following all of their safety and protocols. And there's different thresholds that the department will set forth for us and the CDC will set forth for us in order to address those needs. One thing that we are fortunate in Massachusetts, number one, we have the best education system in the country. Number two, we have the best healthcare system in the country. But we're also fortunate that we do start school a little bit later than the rest of the country. So there are schools who are already in person. I know that Hawaii began on August 4th, and there are other places across the country who are beginning before us. And so we will be taking our information and continuing to update our plans and make sure that we make really appropriate and meaningful decisions around that. So I think giving ourselves until September 16th for a start date with students gives us enough time to plan effectively and to be able to bring as many kids back as possible.
Okay, great. And how about one other question, then I'll yield to my other committee members. What about FKO before and after school programs? Do you know of any of adjustments that have been made to those programs?
Yes, we'd be working with FKO for the kids who are in school and need additional before or after school care for the days that they're in. We would have FKO would be allowed to continue their program. And then on the days when they're remote, FKO will have a different opportunity in the community to offer a full day childcare option for students. So we would be trying to work with families as much as we can to really address all the childcare needs that they may have.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll yield to my fellow committee members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. I'll go to Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say through you to Dr. Vidal, because I think he's going to field most of my questions. I'll say it once and then continue. So, Doc, thank you for this. We've had several conversations, both in the task force meetings as well as offline, and I appreciate your time and your leadership in this very, very difficult challenge, balancing what's best for students, what's best for faculty and staff, what's best for families, and a whole bunch of other challenges that you're taking on. So
I at least want to publicly say I appreciate the candor that you come out with and the work that you've put into so far as I've seen everything that you do, including this.
Thank you.
So now on to the questions. You talked about the Wednesday being a full school day, but I didn't hear that it would be a teacher in front of a monitor, right? If every kid has a Chromebook, right? And you did, and one thing you didn't talk about in this presentation, but you have talked about in the task force, is that the school department has received grant funds for hotspots around the city to improve connectivity issues, again, for the equity issue that we dealt with in the spring. So if students have Chromebooks and we've dealt with the ability for students to get online, why aren't we having teachers in front of a camera at scheduled class times throughout the school day on Wednesdays?
So I think that the Wednesdays would look similar to the remote schedule that I put up, and I could share the screen again and just give me 1 second. So I would consider this remote day similar to what a Wednesday could look like.
Okay. So is this remote schedule that you have, is this an elementary schedule or is this something
So
you
this
would
could
expect?
this would be a sample elementary schedule. What a sample high school schedule would be more blocks. So period A, period B, period C, or period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we would look at that. Now, given a lot of this would be subject to collective bargaining, and we know that we will engage with this. So want to provide a high-level overview. The document that will be released tomorrow will have sample schedules, and these are samples. We will need to engage with all collective bargaining units, and we would make sure that we have clear expectations and that our families and our staff, that everybody's on the same page before we begin instruction, unlike the spring when we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And
Sure.
that was no fault of anyone because it was such a surprise. But we do have time, and we have time to provide our staff with training and our families with clear expectations so that we will tighten up those. And that's why this is a proposal, and I'm doing this a week ahead of the schedule so we can make adjustments and get public feedback before we present this to the department.
Sure. If you can share that schedule again, because it was going to be in my next question, but I'm going to stick with my first question once you put that schedule up.
Sure. This is the elementary schedule.
Right. So when you have this schedule on Wednesdays, you believe that the community circle is going to be with a teacher in front of a monitor, if you will, and all students participating for a half hour in some sort of wellness activities? Is that?
Yeah, so it would sort of be like in the beginning of a lot of school days, they have sort of a morning meeting or a community circle at the elementary level where they bring the kids in, they talk about the day, they do a little SEL, little social emotional learning. They talk to the kids about how they are, they do a check-in, kids can share out. In kindergarten, this would be an opportunity either at the beginning one or at the closing one for, things like where kids are able to do show and tell and things like that. So we would offer those opportunities. And I know that in the spring, the kindergarten kids did some show and tell and whatnot, and it gives kids a chance to be able to present and to speak. And it does hit many of the learning standards as well. So we would be looking at this to be the time that kids would be taking attendance in the community circle, and we're making sure that we're touching base with kids, letting them know what the expectation is for the day, and then going right into the academic blocks.
Okay, so then we go into an academic block of either ELA or math for 30 minutes. And what if we were in school, what would a typical block for ELA or math look like?
Sure. So a typical block at the elementary level would start with a 20 to 30 minute, sometimes they call it the launch. It's a direct instruction to the whole group, and then kids break out into center work. And so that's what we would be seeing over the next block. Is it would be the direct instruction, and then kids would break out, and teachers would have time to go either using breakout rooms, which we provide some PD for teachers on, or separate meetings where teachers could conference with small groups of kids. So it would really try to model what a classroom would look like, where there's some direct whole group instruction, but there's also opportunity for independent work and for small groups.
Okay, and if we were in school, there would be other staff members perhaps in some of these classrooms, whether they be paraprofessionals, you know, or other specialists, tier 2 specialists to help certain students along. Is it your expectation that that would be mimicked in this remote model?
Yes, and for kids with higher needs where there would be co-teaching or a paraprofessional, what I would anticipate is that kids would go through breakout rooms, and each breakout room may have a staff member in it. So that way, you know, we'd be utilizing and maximizing our staff so that small groups of kids would be instructed by one individual adult at a time, and they'll get a little bit more personalized attention, which is different from the model that we had in the spring.
Okay, so with these breakout blocks and small group instruction, your expectation is not, or is it your expectation to have parents who are monitoring their own children during these blocks?
So our expectation would be that the students would be far more independent or reliant on the teacher than on their parent in this model. We would be looking to spend more time with teachers and less time with the parents acting as the teacher or acting as the deliverer of content. We would really try to provide as much support of each adult. Now that we know what remote learning looks like, we would try to provide as much support from adults as we possibly can. And we would try to provide the teachers and the staff members with training in that 10-day lead up to school so that they would be able to comfortably do so, and that kids would be more engaged with staff members throughout the remote days.
Okay, and on this remote schedule, I don't see anything for the items that Ms. Carpenter was talking about with art and music and physical education or anything like that. So I don't know where it is that you, and again, this is just a big overview, and it's a initial draft of a proposal or something, but
so it is in this particular schedule. It is in the last hour of the day, in that block where it would be time for specialist classes. So it's very small at the bottom there after science, social studies, specialist classes. And what we would anticipate is that block would rotate throughout the day for each grade. So if there are 6 grades at the elementary level, there would be 6 different time periods where that block could fall, so that people could be doing that at different times of the day. So that a specialist might be teaching kindergarten at 9 o'clock and first grade at 10 o'clock and second grade at 11 o'clock, and they could have different time periods where they'd be working with different age groups.
Okay.
So they would still have a full day of work as well.
Yeah, I don't see it, but I mean, I understand what you're writing. I don't see it. I mean, I don't see, like you said, we can't play instruments when we're in school because of, fears of spreading the virus, and singing is going to be limited, and there are just going to be people who I don't think are going to be performing their functions. There may be other support pieces that they can take on that will supplement that. So we'll get to reviewing this a little more detail, and there is a task force meeting on Friday, and I think your expectation is we're going to vote on something August 18th, so we still have some time to get there. So I'm just going to hold this for a little bit if everyone doesn't mind, and ask my questions now so I can just get them out. Why are we out of school on Wednesdays? What's the significance of the purpose of being out of school on Wednesdays?
So that would be an opportunity for us to provide additional cleaning, and for us to be able to, logistically provide more instruction remotely to all students, bring them all together in a remote environment, and address some of those social needs as well.
I can understand the cleaning if we stick to a cohort where students were in school Monday and Tuesday, cohort A, and cohort B was in school on Thursday and Friday. But cohort A is in Monday and Thursday, and cohort B is in Tuesday and Friday, which seems like we're getting all the kids in the building before we're doing this additional cleaning. So it doesn't make much sense to me not that I'm a fan of the 2 days in a row and then 5 days off, because I think that was the rationale for going no more than 3 days without seeing a teacher in person or staff members in person. But with this model now, having Wednesday off doesn't make any sense to me, because we're getting all the kids and all the staff together in the same rooms at different times. But if the virus lasts on surfaces for more than 24 hours, then it's there if anyone has it. So maybe we can look at that in a different way and perhaps rethink that. I'm trying to get less remote time, if you can't tell. And
I understand. And, you know, we've tried to flesh it out of what it would look like if cohort A came in for a half day on Wednesday and cohort B came in the afternoon. And I just think there's too much lost instructional time in trying to, you know, get people in for half a day on Wednesday just to shoehorn them in. So, you know, it's not a great model, but I think that the best thing that we can do is get the kids in as much as possible, but also honoring as much instructional time and the to and from school and the logistics around that. I think it'll take away from too much instructional time.
Yeah, no, and look, don't take this as any means of criticism. Like I said, I know you have a difficult task. We all have a difficult task. The 100 or the 95 attendees, you know, are here because of the significance of this conversation and the decisions that we'll make. You know, I do think that, yeah, I will say, and we have talked about it, I do think that the half-day model with the four core classes of instruction and less circle time and less, it might deal with less small group instruction, but we can make it work. We have time to talk about that in another forum. I do want to say that you know, with the Monday, Thursday cohort, I do have some concerns with Monday holidays, and what we do with that, and if that cohort, you know,
they would report on Wednesdays that week.
Okay.
We have talked about that, and we would create a schedule for if there is a day off, whether it's the Monday or say the Tuesday election day, if we're still doing this in November, that they would report on Wednesday. We would draw out a schedule literally every day who reports that day.
Good work, Doc. Thank you everyone for giving me so much time to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Go to Mr. Arnottis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Vidala and the entire group that worked on this. I know how much effort went into it, and obviously we're still developing as we go here. I think this is somewhat of a living conversation that we're going to have until we get there. I agree with some of the comments. I have several questions, and I'm sure everyone does. I said to someone when I was speaking with them the other day about this, you have one topic and it tends to trigger 10 additional questions on top of it. So you just roll and roll and roll. I'm curious if you could speak as much detail as you can right now, just in what it will look like in our facilities and our buildings, that cleaning procedure, what we're doing with ventilation, with heat, that I think is a concern that many people have reasonably. You know, I want us to go back in some capacity, frankly. You know, I think we're all very reactive here to the numbers. You know, we have to respond and be smart about that. But I do want us back in some capacity if it's, you know, safe and healthy. But if you can talk about what we're going to do in the buildings to make sure it's clean and safe for people just to be there, I think a lot of folks would appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I've worked very closely with Jim Hafey, the director of facilities, and we've talked in depth about what that would look like. And there will be enhanced cleaning protocols and sanitation. We would be looking at wiping down touch points on a daily basis and making sure that high traffic areas are wiped down. We do have, and the city was ahead of the curve on this, some of those, the spray disinfectant machines. And so we would be looking to get all of our schools done with those sprays the weekend after the last summer program, and FKO was in there. I think it's the weekend of August 17th. We'd hit all of our schools with a full cleaning, and then we'd hit them again right before the weekend of September 11th, 12th, and 13th, leading up to when students return. And then we would conduct the big sanitation sprayers monthly throughout the school year while school is in session, and we would continue with the touch points. So as part of that, all of our custodians and maintenance workers would have significant training leading up in the first 10 days of school, as would our food service employees and our transportation employees, that we would really take those 10 days of professional development in order to go over all those cleaning protocols and make sure that those are all in place. And some of that is described in the document that will be presented tomorrow as well.
Thank you. I'm going to save my questions for now. And I know we're having a lot here, so I'll let someone else go if they want to jump.
And we are just, I'll do one more piece on what you did say. The air quality and ventilation is also addressed. I know that we've had several schools that have already had air quality assessments. So I have talked to our facilities people about that, and we'll be looking to conduct more of those. We're doing walkthroughs later this week with a member of the AFT on the state level who is representing the teachers, along with the building principal and the director of facilities. We're going to walk every building prior to, just to make sure if there are spaces that don't have adequate ventilation, that we would not use them. We want to make sure that we are really addressing the safety of our staff and students prior to returning to school.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Arnottis. I wanted to ask a question, Dr. Vidala. If you could just go through again the next steps, what the timeframes are going to be, kind of the key decision dates that we have to report to DESE, the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Can you kind of go through those numbers, those dates again for me?
Sure. So tomorrow we'll publish, it'll go out in an email to all families and staff, the draft document, and this is a first pass. And I have to just thank all of our reopening teams, our principals, teachers, parents who have all been involved. It's a comprehensive document. It's 32 pages long, and I didn't write it myself. It was definitely a team effort, and so I appreciate all of that. That will be released tomorrow. We'll have a feedback form for all stakeholders, including community members. It'll be posted on our website and emailed out to our staff and families. And we'll ask for open comment. We have a task force meeting on Friday, which will review some of the comments and make adjustments to the plan. Prior to that, we'll submit the plan to the school committee again for final approval before I submit that to the Department of Ed on the 10th. And it's still a working document, but we do have to submit a proposal to the plan, to the department. That plan can then be adjusted as we go along, as we get more information, and as we continue to work with the public health department and all of our faculty and staff. So the big dates are tomorrow through the 9th would be the open comment period. The 10th would be the submission date. And then the 18th will again have another example where I can present to the school committee, and we'll be able to take a vote on that plan moving forward. We'll have a lot more information as well because we seem to get information every couple of days. So we'll have a lot more information to share with the public at each of our school committee meetings. And I'll also be sending out the correspondence via the letters and through our direct email with families.
Great. So just to be clear, I just want to make sure. So you're not looking for any action or a vote today. The vote that the school committee and I would be taking would be need to be made on the 18th. That would be the date for us. So this is for all of us, kind of information gathering and just kind of learning what your thoughts and plans are. Okay.
Yes,
good.
absolutely. We wouldn't be making a vote tonight on the reopening plan. We're just still putting out our best foot forward. The best plan that we think we have with the information right now and all of the stakeholder information that we've got. We still want more information to come in so that we can adjust that plan and really try to address all of our families' needs. So we do have a number of people who want to return. We know that we have people who feel as though they're unsafe or uncomfortable returning. And that's why we wanted to incorporate the hybrid model with the remote option. So that way families could choose the remote option if they don't feel comfortable, but still holding that in-person option for the families that want it. And so we wanted to try to create the best of both worlds in this very difficult situation.
Great. All right. Thank you, Dr. Vidala. I'd like to open it back up to the school committee. Mrs. Dunn, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Vidala, thank you very much. This report is very good. And I will be honest, I have a lot of concerns about anyone going back to school right now. The features in this that I do appreciate very much are that families have a choice. They can choose to come back in person, or they can choose to stay remote. And I do think that that's important. I'm very happy to see that you're going to try to have a first day of school where students and teachers can meet. I honestly think that that's really important for everyone to be able to give a good start to the year, to be able to meet each other, and to just get it, just to be able to make that connection. And I'm glad for that, really. One of my concerns is when if something happens, if the governor orders all the schools to go remote, if there's another surge in the virus or whatever, at that point, how quickly will our district be able to pivot as far as going completely remote? Have you got plan B?
Absolutely.
Something in the
Yes, thank you. And I really feel strongly that by starting off in a hybrid model and connecting with families and students face to face, those who are comfortable and those who really need to be in, would allow us to then pivot to, if there was another spike, to pivot to a remote model much more seamlessly. But I do feel like in the beginning, especially with the increased technology that we'll be giving out, that we do need that face-to-face time with some of our families. There are some families that will opt out, they'll go remote, and their kids will be very successful. But that's not the truth for all families. And I think that we really need to offer this in-person model for significant members of our population, so that they can become more comfortable with the technology and they will be more prepared, so that if we do have to pivot, we will be much more prepared, and that those kids will get a much better education after training them and giving them the experience, and sort of providing them with that safety net as we go along.
Okay. With the hybrid model and the cohorts, will that work if every single person in the district chose to attend school? Would that be a viable option?
Yes, yes. So that we can meet the needs of 50 to 60% of people at a time. So we would be able to get half of the school in on Mondays and Thursdays and half of the school in on Tuesdays and Fridays. If more people opt out to remote, we can provide more 4-day options for more families. But if everybody opts in, which is their right, and we would be able to accommodate that, we are making this plan based on if everybody came in, we can meet their needs. If people want to go remote, we will provide teachers for them, because there are some teachers that will want to go remote or that will need to go remote due to health concerns. And we will be able to create a remote learning academy to address that.
Okay. And I also have a question through you. It may be to the mayor or to you, Dr. Vidala. Our school nurses are public health nurses, and we're very lucky that we have a full-time nurse in each of the elementary schools. Currently, I know that our nurses have been working with Sharon Cameron to do the contact tracing and all the other things that have gone along with public health aspects of the COVID virus. Will the nurses be returning to our buildings, and will they be present while we have students in the buildings?
So I can address that. Yes, our expectation is that school nurses would be in the building. I know that they are working to hire more nurses. They want more support. And so, their primary function while school is in session is they're supporting our students in the schools. And they also did unbelievable work, and we can't let them know how much we appreciate them enough for the work that they did with the contract tracing throughout the community. And I think that there will be guidance for us in terms of thresholds if there is an increase. So if there was an increase, we would then look to pivot to remote, and then our school nurses would be there to support the community. But if the numbers remain low, under 2%, where they currently are, they're not as needed. It's not as a critical need in the community. The critical need would be for our students. And so it kind of goes hand in hand. And I don't know if the mayor has another perspective on that, but I think that's sort of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. And then Let me see. So how will students be assigned to the cohorts? Is that a family choice, or is it something that you have a formula for?
Yeah, so we've been talking to the principals, and so that would be at the school level. They would make those decisions. They know the kids the best. We would try to make sure that siblings were together, unless there was some particular reason that a family didn't want that. But we would try to make sure that families would be together. We'd want diverse groups of kids at all ability levels in each cohort A and B. And we would make sure that we provide that information with plenty of lead time so that families can prepare. But we would look to, again, to minimize the cohorts, having families together, having kids in the twins in the same class, and things like that.
Okay. And also, as far as the assignment on the buses, how will that work? I mean, normally you're assigned to a bus because of where you live and where you go to school. Will that be affected by the cohort assignments as well?
Yes, so that would be kids in cohort A would ride the bus on, Mondays and Thursdays, or, cohort B, Tuesdays and Fridays. Siblings would be on the same bus. Siblings can actually share a seat, which is also helpful. Because they're in the same household, they could share a seat. That could increase, the capacity on a small level. So we would, that's one of the reasons why we would look to keep siblings together as well in terms of transportation.
Okay. And you may be discussing this in a minute with the budgetary considerations, but are there increased costs currently under this plan? I've seen it recommended that we have a monitor on every bus to make sure that students are keeping the social distancing. Additional staff needed in the schools to assist with social distancing when people pass through the hallways and such. Are those costs already being anticipated?
Yes, we continue to monitor the costs. At this time, we're doing everything we can to address the needs within the appropriated budget. And so, we will talk a little bit about the budget later, but we do feel pretty confident that right now we're going to work within our means, and we'll do everything we can with the appropriated budget that we have.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all the questions I have at the moment.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Amico.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to the committee. And first of all, Dr. Vidala, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. It's a great plan. It really is. I told someone earlier today, if you're a home run hitter, you swing for the fences. You try to hit a home run. If you're a superintendent, you have to do what's best for children and try to get them in schools and try to get them educated. So I applaud you for that. I'd be lying if I told anyone, and I'm just torn on this whole issue. I have a ton of confidence in our administration. I have a ton of confidence in our building principals and our teachers. I don't have a ton of confidence in this virus. I'll be honest with you. It's very difficult to look at this and say, this is our plan, and it's a great plan, and we still have 3 weeks before we'll probably act on it. August 18th or the 25th, and a lot can change over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I think what I want to do is caution the public in a sense that because we have this in front of us, doesn't this is what's going to happen 3 weeks from now, or a month from now. Things can change very, very quickly. We're fortunate. Someone alluded to the public health people that we have working for us. And, the buzzword over the last 20 years in education has been STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, really getting those scores up, really working, getting students involved in those types of programs because they're important. And again, we have those people in front of us. So we really do have to, the Sharon Camerons and all those people who work in public health, we really do have to listen to them moving forward. And again, it'll be over the next 3 weeks. I wanted to take us back to last March with remote learning, and a lot of people had issues with it. A lot of people deemed it not effective, and I agreed it wasn't effective. But we have to also look at a lot of the items a lot of the things that happened during that time. we had an interim superintendent. We didn't have an MOU or a memory of motion of understanding with the teachers unions. Some students didn't buy in. Maybe some teachers didn't buy in. Some parents didn't buy in. So we had this virus. So there was a lot going on, and I think that's one of the reasons why it wasn't effective. Personally, I didn't like the remote model as a teacher as well. I can throw my end on that. I do think the hybrid model is a good model, but again, I am torn because of this virus. How long would it last before we have to shut down? Will we get to Halloween? Will we get to October before public health says, we can't do this anymore, we have to go remote? So I guess, again, it's an incredible plan. It's a great proposal. I just want to caution the public that whatever we say tonight or whatever we say next week or in 3 weeks, things can change on a dime. On March 12th, everything was normal in a classroom on that Thursday. We called off school for Friday that 13th, and then everything changed, and here we are. So I just want to applaud you again, Dr. Vidala, for an incredible presentation, for really putting kids first. Again, I'm just torn on this. I'm not being indecisive. I just think that I can see value from both sides. And, hopefully over the next 3 weeks, we'll get a clearer picture. But I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. We'll open it back up. Mrs. Carpenter, do you have some further questions?
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a couple of different questions. One is, well, first, I just want to kind of address what Mr. Amico was saying. It is a really hard decision, and we don't know where we'll be from, 1 week to the next. And, I always find myself at the end of our budget process explaining to the public that it's a fluid document. It always changes. And I kind of feel like now I'm going to be explaining that it's a fluid school year. It could be always changing, and that's the truth. We don't know what's going to come. I think that this plan that we have before us is a good one. In an ideal world, I'd like to see the kids go back every single day, 5 days a week. A lot of parents have reached out to me, and they want their kids to go back to school, and with proper precautions. It can be done. I'm in that environment right now. I'm in a school right now, and we're making it happen. That's not to say tomorrow somebody couldn't end up with it, but it is possible as long as everyone does their part. And with that being said, as long as everyone does their part, Dr. Vidala, do we have an option for, say, somebody who is in a cohort that is to attend on a Tuesday, and they're just not feeling well? It's not COVID. It's just, you really can't come in. Do they have the option to jump into one of the remote classes if they're kind of well enough and do that just to keep them on track?
I think some of those little details really depends on the context. So I think we could explore opportunities for that to happen. I think I'm unclear on exactly what it would look like in terms of, if we do have a remote classroom that's fully remote, that teacher would be responsible for those kids. And if we have a student who's attending in the hybrid model, they're assigned to their teacher, and they would be able to engage in the remote activities from their teacher. I wouldn't feel comfortable with them jumping from classroom to classroom. I just think the continuity of instruction may not be clear, but I do think that there are significantly more learning opportunities for kids now in this model when they're home. Through some remote opportunities. So I think we'd have to flesh that out exactly what it looks like. But I do think there would be opportunities with their teacher in their classroom, but maybe not jumping from the remote learning option that's assigned to a different teacher. I just think that educationally wouldn't have the continuity of instruction that we'd be looking for.
Yeah, no, fair enough. One of my other questions, you mentioned that from tomorrow through the 9th, we're going to have like a public comments. where is that and who are they commenting to and what is that, where is that going to happen?
So we've created an online form where they can type in feedback and send it to us, and Dr. Lord and I will be working with each of the school-based teams and each of the levels to review that, to incorporate their feedback into the final plan, and then we'll be continuing to updating and sharing the plan as we develop it. And then a big piece of that on Friday with our reopening task force, we will share a lot of the comments, share some of the edits that we make, and we'll just be completely transparent about the changes that we make along the way as we're incorporating all the stakeholder feedback.
Great, thank you. I'm all set.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Arnottis, do you have further questions?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Olympio, do you have further questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Vidala, have you thought of, in the event, let's just say we have to do a 180, or it turns out that we do have to go to 100% remote schedule, have you thought about the budget impact on that, where if we were 100% remote, I mean, I would think that there'd be some jobs that potentially would get cut. Unfortunately, I mean, we have gym teachers, music teachers, art teachers, athletic departments. So I would think that if that were the case a few weeks from now, that's something that unfortunately that I think the committee would have to deal with, because certainly there would be a lot of things that probably wouldn't be needed in a remote situation, and potentially use up those resources in other areas. Have you thought about that situation?
Yeah, so if we go fully remote, I do think that we'll still need considerations for how kids receive special education services, including especially their therapies. There are certain therapies that cannot be done through teletherapy. Speech is a little bit easier through teletherapy, but some of the occupational therapy and some of the physical therapy needs to be hands-on, and it is more of a medical model, and those employees and they're very specialized, and they have a clinical background, and they can use proper PPE. So I would look to either utilize our facilities or even walk-in services if we went fully remote, because I do think that we need to do that. That might impact the budget, but any budget decisions that we make, I would bring forth to the committee as I'll do later today. So my feeling, it has been, and I've said this publicly during the budget process, is we were appropriated a specific amount of money from the city council, and as long as we stay within that realm, we don't need to go back to the city council because they've appropriated us the number. But for me, any change in that budget, I need approval from the committee, and it would require a vote. So there would be discussions that go on. We have considered a lot of different possibilities about the need if we go fully remote. I do value the arts and I value our specialists, but remote learning needs to be very different than it was in the spring. And the expectations will need to be very different. And that being said, any budgetary considerations would come to the committee, and we would have discussion on it in a full vote.
Right. I mean, and I'm certainly in favor of this plan that you set out. I'm just thinking, if we have no choice, I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that 3 weeks from now things could be different, but I just want to, the public, to be aware that we are thinking of those things, because if we're not having gym, if we're not having music, if we're not having fall sports, I mean, there's going to be costs that we appropriated for this budget that, that we could probably potentially use elsewhere. So that's all.
Yes, I think those considerations, will definitely need to happen if there's another spike and we can't have athletics or we can't have, other programs, we'd need to really look at, making some hard decisions moving forward so that we can utilize those funds to get them and give the kids the experiences that they need.
Right. But as, Ms. Carpenter said, let's hope for the best, and we'll address it, if that time comes, but certainly, this plan's a good one, and certainly let's hope for the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. And certainly we do have some federal money that we've been given that's directly for COVID relief. It's very tight in terms of the restrictions that we can use that money for at this point. But I anticipate and envision that there'll be some money that we can apply to those funds regarding public health, nurses, other protective devices and masks and clothing and things that we need moving forward. So I anticipate that we'll be able to utilize those funds. And I anticipate that our budget review will continue pretty much on a meeting by meeting basis. I anticipate that there'll be special meetings that we have to have as things unfold here and we get closer to that September 16th date. And again, that's going to be also a fluid process. When I presented to the council to get the funding, I told them and was very open to the fact that, you know, we could be coming to them in September, October, November, as we kind of work our way through these funding questions. So again, this is going to be a work in progress for us, I think, on a meeting by meeting basis. So right now we do have some federal relief for COVID related funds. Again, right now it's kind of restricted, which is a little bit frustrating as to where we can use those funds and what we can use those funds for. But I anticipate that that'll be something that will be a part of these discussions moving forward, no matter which route we go. So I want to open it back up, Mrs. Dunn. I think you had some further questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Dr. Vidala. I need to settle a question in my mind. When you spoke about the hybrid model, some people will be attending school and some people will be remote. My impression was that if you were remote, you were going to be watching your teacher and your teacher while you were home, and the teacher would be teaching. You'd be watching the lesson and you would still be present with your classmates, and that's not the case. Am I
No,
correct?
so so it's, I know it's confusing. So in the hybrid model, if you opt into the hybrid model and you go to school on Monday, you would have on Tuesday, you would have assignments that you would be working on, and you might have videos and things like that you would be doing while the teacher was instructing the other students in your cohort. There would be opportunities for questions and correspondence similar to, you know, after school when a student has a question, they can email a teacher, or over the weekend if there's an assignment, they email the teacher and the teacher, you know, can get back to them. So there would be those types of opportunities, but in the remote model, if you attend school on Monday, you'll be given certain work to do, and then on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, you would engage again with the teacher. And then on Thursday, you'd be in person. So the requirement would be pretty much that 3 days a week you have either personal contact face-to-face or virtual contact with the teacher. And then on 2 days a week, you would be doing independent work, watching videos, and engaging in remote activities that may not be with a live teacher.
Okay. So do we then need to increase our staff in order to have classroom teachers and remote teachers?
No, so the remote only option, those students would be assigned to a remote only teacher. So we would separate teachers who would be remote only teachers teaching students, you know, they might report to a location and teach from an academic space. And then kids would be learning remotely all day. That would be if people opt out of the hybrid model for the remote model. If they're in the hybrid model, they would be taught by their classroom teacher.
Okay. All right. And then depending upon which choice a family makes, will they all still be able to have that opportunity for that first day of school to meet whoever is going to be teaching them, whether it's the classroom teacher or the remote teacher?
Yes, we would have time for all students to meet their teachers.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Amico, do you have further questions?
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Vidala, I just came up with a couple of questions. I actually got a couple of texts and messages from parents watching. So first thing, on the hybrid model, if cohort A is on a Monday, is a holiday, are we going to move that to a Wednesday, or how are we going to make up for the Monday? I guess there are a bunch of Monday holidays.
Yes, they would report on the Wednesday. So they would do Wednesday that week.
Okay, great. The other thing is, I got a couple of emails from actual graduates who their colleges have put out there that they could actually defer their enrollment to next year. Some other students have also are thinking about having that gap year this year. And I just think it would be a great opportunity for some of those graduates to possibly somehow help out in our schools, not necessarily probably in our schools, but maybe even with parents if, if someone needs some extra daycare or a tutor, I would, maybe we could put something out there to the community for babysitters or graduates to help out. I know you had mentioned the YMCA, and of course we have FKO under contract, but it's just another set of eyes to help out with some of these working parents who don't have the luxury of working on a remote setting like we can in some cases. They actually have to be physically present at their jobs, and they're in dire need of daycare or childcare.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Miko. And I think that, we would have opportunities in the community through FKO and through the YMCA, but there could also be other independent opportunities where families could directly work with some of these graduates or people on the gap years.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mr. Hockman, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doc, through you, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Vidala, will families have an opportunity to change their mind with the choice that they make for September 16? So if they want to go remote and realize after a week or two it's not working, would they have the opportunity to do the in-person for 2 days or whatever we decide?
Yeah, we would ask that families try to commit for the year. So we put that in the plan that would be an ask. If there is an available seat, we would welcome them back. And we would work with individual families around specific needs. I mean, we wouldn't prevent people from returning, but in terms of consistency and continuity of instruction, we would, look for people to try to make the decision based on the full year and commit to that. However, we would try to accommodate people as best we can.
Good. And I was happy to see that the commissioner relaxed the 180-day requirement to 170 days to provide teachers and staff with adequate professional training to make all three of these models work if necessary. Is the district going to offer any similar type of training to parents?
Yeah, so we can look into what that would look like. I was thinking that the first 2 days would be an opportunity for a small portion of that, but I am familiar with different things, parent universities and things like that, where you can have tutorials, and we would look to create sort of tutorials for families that would be videos that they could watch just as resources for parents. But we could also, create some modules where sort of like a parent university to engage parents and try to, help them with some of the technology issues that they may have.
Okay. And I think this might pertain to the special education population, but are we seeking any waivers in terms of time standards or services that are we would provide students in a non-COVID environment?
So right now we're continuing to provide resources either in person through our extended year program or remotely. We've been working, the timelines have not been relaxed through the federal government. So we are continuing to try to do everything we can, either remotely or face-to-face. And this plan definitely addresses the need to provide those services, regardless of whatever learning environment we're in. We will provide those services to families.
Okay. And this last one, we currently have 0 COVID-related deaths for anybody under the age of 20 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since statistics started being published back in March. We have a positive COVID test rate. I think you in your PowerPoint had it at 2% or so in Peabody, or 1.9%, or somewhere around there.
1.79 was the most recent 14-day in
Right.
Peabody.
So what do the numbers need to look like in order for the Peabody Public School Committee and Department to have full in-person learning?
So I think the numbers are, to me, it's not a numbers game in terms of full in person. It's around the guidance with the distancing and the other safety precautions with the arrival, dismissal, and it's really around the safety precautions and the distancing rather than the percent. I think with the percent, once the threshold reaches a certain amount, that would be when we would look to flip to a remote model. And I've seen numbers in terms of maybe 5% or higher. You would look to if your community is 5% or higher, you might look to go to a fully remote model. But the opposite hasn't been true in terms of when the distancing requirements are relaxed. So I think it's the logistics and the distancing that are really the concern around bringing everybody back rather than the positive test rate. So I haven't seen a number that says if you're below 1% or if you're below 2%, then it changes the distancing requirements. I think we'd be looking more for the Board of Health to make a decision or the CDC to make a recommendation. But it's really around either having a vaccine or having statistical data that shows that the distancing guidelines have changed. So absent that, we're looking at the 6-foot guidance and recommending remote.
So I know that Mr. Olympio brought up some budgetary issues. If we're not, we don't have fall sports, if we don't have the need for music and art and physical education teachers to the extent that we budgeted for them. I was in favor in the spring of paying for staff members some staff members worked very, very hard, and I'm appreciative and grateful for the time that they put in, and some didn't at all. I'm not going to be in favor of paying staff members who aren't going to be performing their duties. What I would be comfortable doing is, in going through collective bargaining, is taking that money that's budgeted and paying for additional teachers so that we can accomplish 6-foot physical distancing, and perhaps having a morning session and an afternoon session in full, like the old days in Peabody, where they had to have 2 sessions at the high school because of the enrollment numbers. So it's been done before. There is precedent for it within the bargaining units that exist in this city. I would be in favor of reallocating that money, and we still need to allocate money because we haven't done it. We've just had money appropriated. We still need to have real budget meetings, and I'm looking forward to them because it sounds like the numbers for the appropriations are pretty solid. I haven't heard much in terms of them changing from the state or federal level. So we do need to start scheduling some independent budget meetings. And Mr. Scanlon, we talked about getting the backup material for the budget so we can actually see what those expenditures look like as opposed to just the line items. But I would be in favor of something along those lines. If it's just social distancing, if that's what the issue is, we have buildings that are capable of being used 24 hours a day, and we have staff members who, at 6-foot social distancing, are telling us at an 80% rate that they're comfortable coming back to school. And we have families and parents, if we maintain 6-foot social distancing, are telling us at, I think, a 90% rate. I could have got that wrong. I don't remember if it was 80 or 90. I think it was 90% rate, who said that they would be in favor of in-person learning. We can get this done. I still think we can get this done. I know that there's a lot of pressure coming from a lot of people, and again, not making any commentary in terms of blaming anybody, but if we truly want to get this done, like I said at the task force meeting, I was on a bus going from the parking lot at Woods Hole to the ferry at Woods Hole, and I was shoulder to shoulder with 30 people on that bus. But now we have transportation guidance coming down from DESE saying that a school bus that has the capacity of holding 73 kids can only hold 27. Doesn't just happen, because of the safety measures. We have 0 deaths of kids under 20. They're all recovering. All the kids under 20 are recovering. That's who's riding the school bus. But we got a lot of pressure at the State House too. A lot of pressure in Congress about what's going on. And it's frustrating because parents want their kids back in school. We need to get this economy going. If we think our budget was bad this year, if we keep these kids home for extended period of times, and if you're talking about a vaccine, Dr. Vidala, and I know you're quoting, other sources, and you need to be prudent in your position. And don't take this as criticism or blame, but if we're talking about a vaccine, we could be 2 years down the road. I can ask the mayor, I can ask her rhetorically, how many foreclosures are going to happen in the city of Peabody? How many real estate tax bills aren't going to get paid? How many hotel rooms remain vacant? How many restaurants are going to lose their business? And then what happens when our budget that went from 80 million to 74 million is suddenly 60 million and 55 million? Yes, we don't have those resources. There's 0 deaths for kids under 20, and we have a 1.79 positive test rate for all ages now in the last 14 days. I'll get off the soapbox now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Looks like I still have some hands raised. I wanted to certainly allow everybody the opportunity. Is there anything, additional questions or comments? Mrs. Dunn, your hand's raised?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to yield.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Amico, any further comments?
Sure, thank you through the chair of the committee. And, there was mention of teachers and rebudgeting and reworking numbers. I think, and Mr. Hockman, you said this through the chair, Mr. Hockman, you did say this, it's going to take everybody. It's going to take every employee that we have to make this work, regardless if it's in person, hybrid, or remote. And some of the people that were mentioned, phys ed teachers, they can provide a very positive support system for students. Many of them are a health and wellness specialist. And, just today, the news, you can Google it, all over the news. Whether it's left-wing, right-wing news, 30% of adults are having depression and anxiety during these times. Can you imagine what the number is for students? Well, I can. It's probably double that. So the kids who already had anxiety and depression, it's going to be through the roof. We're going to need every phys ed teacher, whether it's using them for wellness and health and physical activity. We're going to need music. We're going to need art. These are ways that kids can get out their anxieties and pressures and all those evil things going through their bodies. Because, no offense to our English, math, science, and social studies teachers, but those are the fun subjects, right? That's what I loved school, but I really loved basketball and football. So what I'm saying is I think we need to, yield on that thought and really, we need everybody. This is, I hate to be cliche, but this is a village approach. We're not going to be successful if we start, moving people out or reassigning them. We need everyone. We're already shorthanded in education. If there's one thing that we know about education, those of us that have been in it, it can never be fully funded, and it never has been. And it's a classes system. Those who have are going to do well, and those that don't aren't. And this is why we're in this situation. Really need kids who live in an apartment with 3 or 4, so they only have one living with a senior sports. And this is.
Sorry,
I just
Mr.
think that we
Amico.
need everyone on board.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think I missed.
No,
I'll
sorry.
yield. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit at the end there, Mr. Amico.
I apologize. I just wanted to end in saying that, this is a difficult time, and I think we need everyone on board. Sure, some people might be more important than the others, but to kids, we need everyone on board for their social emotional being. And I'll just yield with one more thing. If everyone thinks that we're going to go back to school and education is going to happen, this new normal is not going to be anything like March 12th, the day before we shut down. This is going to take some time. This is going to take a year or 2 years before we even see a resemblance or a semblance of normalcy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mr. Arnottis, was some additional questions?
Yes. Now, I have a more specific question, I think, than the broader conversation, but I do have probably a few comments as well. One question I have for you, Dr. Vidala, and I completely appreciate if this hasn't been fleshed out yet in the working conversations you guys have been having, but I'm curious because I understand how basically you could split and have, okay, you have someone who's completely virtual throughout the day and then an in-person. I can understand that. I'm curious how that would work at the high school, because I know, you know, you have a limited amount of spaces and teachers and time, frankly. I know in some cases we've done 1 or 2 periods of, say, an AP physics or an AP, you know, bio, or some of the other extracurriculars that I guess we offer there. I'm not kind of referring to gym and sports. I'm more referring to kind of some of the unique offerings that we have up at the high school that have benefited our students on their resumes for college or wherever it is they may choose to go, whether it's, you know, culinary. I know that's difficult to do remotely, but just some of those. I know some you obviously cannot do that would be hands-on, but I do wonder primarily about the APs and some of those other almost niche classes that benefit students who may have an interest and can actually help their resume when they're applying to college if they do well in them. You know, if they're struggling in other subjects, they might have an interest. So I'm curious how some of that has been fleshed out. You know, if it hasn't, or if it's still in the works, you know, I can circle back with you. But if you have any knowledge on that, because that's something I would be interested to.
So
learn on.
I think I understand your question. And just to be clear, are you saying that, or asking if a teacher of one of those unique classes opted for the remote model or was unable to physically come back and needed to go remote, what would happen to the students who are in person that needed that class? Is that sort of the gist of it?
Essentially, and I'm also just trying to make sure that we're going to be offering as much as we normalcy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we have been working with the Department of Education, and they have relaxed some of the licensure requirements, which would allow people to teach up to 50% of their caseload outside of their licensed area. So, for example, someone who would be capable of teaching AP US history, but may have an English degree, would have the ability to teach that course this year without a waiver, because they could teach up to 50% of that class load with, within their current license area. So we would be able to try to schedule it creatively to honor all of the requests of the students, as well as providing some of those online opportunities. So we would be fleshing that out. We would work with people who would be working within their license area, and then we have some flexibility from the department to be able to offer some of those unique classes outside of people's license area, as long as they're competent and willing to teach it. So we have started to flesh out some of those issues.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll hold off for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. I see Mr. Olympio, your hand raised. Do you like further comment?
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Vidala, have you considered, in addition to create an additional space, libraries, gyms, and cafeterias that clearly aren't going to be used on a regular basis?
Yes, we did flesh that model out, and we would be able to use some of those spaces as far as instructional spaces to get more kids in the building. And I think when we did it, we were spreading our staff so thin that we wouldn't be able to provide the real high quality instruction to do that. I would basically be cutting all of the classes in half and putting everyone in an instructional space, but not maybe we wouldn't have all the staff to be able to teach it or the feasibility to do so. I sort of, equated it to a house of cards. One person calls out sick or one person is unable to come in and the whole thing just collapses. So we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. What we would want to do is within this hybrid model, utilize those spaces, those additional spaces in the classroom to bring back kids in that cohort C or specialized populations and utilize those spaces in the building to give them those specialized services on the non-days. So we did flesh that out, and the feasibility of it, it just wasn't a model that we felt was sustainable or was something that we really could do with our current staff. And I just felt like it was spreading ourselves too thin. So by utilizing those spaces, we would want to do the hybrid model and be able to utilize those spaces to really support the at-risk or the high-need populations. And I think we could do that much more thoughtfully and in a more meaningful way than just spreading everybody out 6 feet and not maybe providing them with the appropriate staff.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Olympio. Any further comments or questions from the school committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please, Mrs. Dunn, go ahead.
Thank you. Just one, I just wanted to thank Mr. Miko because what he said was really important. It shows that uh, the subjects that we provide to our students at this point are probably even more vital just to keep the kids interested in school, to move them ahead, and to continue to enrich them. And there will be many ways of teaching music and art and physical education online, just as there is in person. It may be a bit different, but we've all seen videos on YouTube and Facebook already about you know choirs practicing together virtually, and bands and symphony orchestras performing from their living rooms, and it all comes together. And if that's what we have to do, then that's what we'll do. Really did want to thank you for that. And I also did want to explain to people and acknowledge that this is very difficult. Trying to make a decision on how to provide education to close to 6,200 children in the middle of a pandemic, knowing full well that all those plans could change in an hour and we have to be able to notify people, and realizing that all of society basically relies upon education, and the world is finally realizing that we don't just teach our children, we're feeding them, providing social emotional support, uh, basically providing daycare so parents can work and the economy can open up. And that's a lot of sacrifice for a lot of people. And it's a very difficult decision. When you think about it, in 3 weeks, we're looking at bringing all these people back into buildings and trying to keep them 6 feet apart. There are about 10 of us on here right now. We're all sitting in our living rooms making this kind of a vote. It's a crazy world at the moment, and the decisions are tough, and they do seem to be getting tougher. But I'm glad that Mr. Miko got down to basics and made sure that everybody understood we want to educate these kids and provide as much education as we possibly can under these circumstances, because this is not normal, and normal is going to be totally different in the future. So I just wanted to thank him.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I think that was very well said. And I think it's always been a great source of pride in our PV school system that we've been able to offer, so many different, offerings for our students: sports, performing arts, different clubs. And, I know that that goes a long way to our students identifying who they are, and being with the students that have shared a similar interests. So those are all extremely important parts of what we provide. And that's going to be another challenge for us, is to try to help our students be with those students that they identify with, in those programs and clubs and offerings that we provide that they need to be with. So yeah, a lot of difficult decisions need to be made, a lot of challenges we have upcoming, and I just feel real confident we have a lot of good people working to try to come up with the right way to do this. So thank you for that, those comments from all of our school committee members. Any other comments before we go back to Dr. Vidal? I know he's going to continue his report, and I certainly want to open it up for public participation for those that would like to comment.
Just quickly.
Yeah, please, Mr. Hockman, go right ahead.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but Miss Dunn did. I've been advocating for us having in-person meetings for about a month now, and I'd be happy to take a motion to take a vote on that. I have spoken to Sharon Cameron about it. She's comfortable with us going back to in-person meetings. I think the science allows us, first of all, the law allows us to do it, and the science is supportive of us doing it. And I think you're absolutely right, Ms. Dunn. If we're asking our staff to go back and our students to go back, we should be meeting live. And I'm absolutely willing to do that. I was willing to do it tonight. I was willing to do it at our last meeting. And if we want to take a vote about doing it, meeting live for our meetings moving forward, I'm happy to make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Can you maybe hold that motion until we get through this item, and then
we can get past public participation and other things? Yes.
Exactly. Thank you. I think that merits further discussion, but yeah, I'd like to stay on this topic for now. Anybody else before we go back to Dr. Vidal for the continuation of his report? Any further comments or questions at this time? All right, I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Vidal, for the continuation of your report. And then following that, I'm going to open it up for public participation. I know we've had a great deal of interest, which is certainly expected and anticipated. And we want to give the opportunity for people to be heard on this. So Dr. Vidal, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Betancourt. And the rest of the superintendent's report is relatively brief. I do want to give an update on the budget. So we continue to examine our budget, and as I had stated several times, we have an appropriated budget, and anytime that there may be changes or we look into things that we think will help our students moving forward, I'll bring them to the committee. If there's any changes within that budget, we would look for a vote. We did get some relatively good news over the past couple of weeks in terms of our federal grants being relatively level funded. So we didn't lose any money in the grants, which I had brought up at the last brief meeting we had. We were able to reduce class size at the Carroll School by adding a 4th grade teacher. We are looking to, within the Title I grant, we are looking to add a Welch School math specialist to address some of the needs there, and a center school grade 2 teacher in order to reduce the class size at grade 2 at the center school. That is able to be paid for through Title I funds and through the good budgeting that we had done prior to the budget being released. So those are some updates there. We did get some good news out of Capitol Hill and through DESE that our Chapter 70 funds are a little bit up from last year. And so we are cautiously optimistic. We haven't gotten the full appropriated amount from what the city will be required in terms of net school spending, but this certainly helps where the city is at. We are, again, our funding is made up of Chapter 70 money plus a municipal contribution, and then above and beyond that, the city has historically gone above net school spending. So we're very grateful for the city for that. We do understand that the commercial tax revenue is down and that the city is taking a hit. So we do appreciate the appropriation that we got, and we're feeling better about the appropriation we got. It is still tight for us, but we are there. Within the current budget, I've talked to Principal Steve Magno at the high school with some of the openings that they have and what it's going to take in order to open up the building and to run it effectively. I think one of the biggest things that we're looking at as in terms of our staff and our students, we really want to make sure that they have the support they need to be successful. And in talking to Mr. Magno, within the current budget that they have, he really feels as though the high school needs, and I 100% support this, at this time, they only have Principal Magno, an assistant principal, and 1 dean right now. And in order to give teachers the feedback they need on remote learning and on hybrid learning, in order to supervise students, and in order to work out all the logistics, he really needs to be fully staffed with his administrative team with 3 deans, 1 assistant principal, and him as the principal. So that would be reinstating a position that was cut in the budget that we do think that we can afford now based on where we are within the current constraints of the budget. So he would be looking to reinstate that position. We do have the money for it. Mr. Scanlon has taken a look at things. Mr. Farrell has taken a look at things from an HR standpoint as well. We have the money in the budget at the high school, and I do fully support this so that he would have his full administrative team to be able to reopen the schools. In addition, he has a position that he would like to, again, support students with, and that would be hiring a full-time school adjustment counselor to support the health and wellness of the students as they return, or if we go remote, to be able to connect with kids. Right now, they only have 1 in the appropriated budget, and so we'd be looking to repurpose a position to add that position. So at this time, he is looking to have 2 deans, to hire 2 deans and to hire a school adjustment counselor. So it's really reinstating 1 dean position and repurposing another position to a school adjustment counselor. So I'll certainly answer any questions about that, but I would be looking for the school committee, someone, if you are willing to make a motion to post one dean, to add 1 dean position to the high school budget and to add a school adjustment counselor.
Thank you, Dr. Vidal. Mr. Amico? You have your hand raised?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to follow the recommendation of the superintendent to repurpose the one dean position and to hire a second dean position for the high school.
Yeah, so we have one open dean position in the budget. We'd be looking to add a second one or reinstate the position that was in there last year and to hire a school adjustment counselor.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion to follow the recommendation of the superintendent.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I'm sorry, there was a second. Who was that? Is that you, Mr. Hockman?
It was
Who
me.
made the second? Mrs. Carpenter?
Randy was using her deep voice.
All right, so we have a motion
We're
that's been
meeting
made.
remotely.
We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amico, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Mrs. Harris, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter,
Did you get it?
no.
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympio,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn,
Yes. And on the motion, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to request that the job description of the deans be sent to the school committee members. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
And with that, I'd like to make a motion to hire a school adjustment counselor for the high school.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mr. Amico, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sorry, on the motion, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Mr. Miko, is this the same school adjustment counselor that Dr. Vidala referenced, or is this an additional school adjustment?
Yes, I'll amend it as to follow the recommendation of the superintendent to hire a school adjustment counselor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympio,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Vidala.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee, and on behalf of Mr. Magno and the entire high school team, I know they appreciate the support. There are 2 items left on the superintendent's report. The first one is a notice from the estate of Ruth Rappaport regarding George Peabody Medal Awards. The estate of Miss Rappaport has asked to make a donation to the school department and to purchase George Peabody medals, 14 karat gold George Peabody medals for each recipient each year. And so I'd entertain a motion to accept the donation with gratitude of the Ruth Rappaport estate.
What a wonderful gesture. Make a motion to accept with gratitude and send a letter of acknowledgement to the attorney who informed us of this, and perhaps to the surviving heirs and family members as well. What a wonderful gesture.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. You've heard the motion made, seconded by Mr. Arnottis. I think that was very well said, Mr. Hockman, and that is a tremendous gesture. So roll call vote on the motion made by Mr. Hockman.
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympio,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn,
Yes.
Great, thank you. Dr. Vidala, I think you have one more item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the last item is a correspondence that we received from Mr. William Lober, and he wrote us a letter and said he recently learned with great sadness of the death of Ruth Rappaport. And enclosed, please find his check as a donation to the Peabody Public Schools, to the Peabody Veterans Memorial High School in her memory. So Mr. Lober would like to make $50 donation to Peabody High School in Miss Rappaport's memory. So I would entertain a motion to accept with gratitude.
So moved. So moved.
Right, you've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Olympio. All in favor of that motion. I don't think we need to vote. That motion's been approved. Thank you, Dr. Vidala. Anything further?
And with that, that concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Dr. Vidala. That was very, very well done. I'd like to turn over to public participation, and I appreciate the school committee's decision to reverse and go to the superintendent's report first and then go to public participation. I certainly think a number of the comments tonight would pertain to Dr. Vidala's report, so I appreciate the committee doing that. So Dr. Lord, I'd like to bring you and Chris Mitchell in, make sure that we have everybody who would like to speak have that opportunity. So it looks like we have a number of people with their hands raised. Dr. Lord, you
Yep, I lost power at my home. I'm running off my phone. I'm at 7%. So if things cut out, I'm hoping one of the other tech members can bring members in. I will invite participants that are currently attending. There are 7 that have their hands raised and would like to participate. The first one is Jess. So I will try to invite Jess into this meeting. And that functionality is not available on my phone. I think that's one of the, oh, here's Jess. And Jess, just a reminder, you have a 3-minute time limit. You need to state your full name and your address. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessica Luque, and I teach up at the high school. I think I speak for a large population where we may have children of our own that go to other school districts. And if our school follows one model and another school follows, or another district follows a separate model, we may be looking at a situation where if we do go back to this hybrid model, and for instance, our kids' school district goes to a fully remote model, now we have the task of homeschooling our kids as well as reporting to the building every day to teach our students. And I was just wondering if this has been in discussion at all to help accommodate this large population of families with young children that are in possibly other districts.
Thank you, Jess. The rules don't allow us to respond to specific questions, which kind of seems ridiculous. But Dr. Vidala, that is something that certainly we're taking into account. I think we can certainly say that and maybe include that in the next school committee meeting we have to give a further update on that. Is that fair for me to say?
Absolutely, and I can cite the plan that will be out tomorrow in the remote. In the alternative hybrid. In the alternative childcare options, we do provide preference to faculty members.
But I think that the childcare is different from homeschooling, or at least in my opinion, my elementary school kids will actually need to be homeschooled as well, like not just taken care of, but they will need to be, going through their curriculum. Someone will have to go through their curriculum. And I don't know, I just see that as being different than childcare.
I'm happy to speak to you tomorrow about it if you'd like to call my office. My understanding is that the school districts are responsible for the education and that we would provide people who could support that work. So I mean, I'm happy to speak to you specifically about your needs tomorrow, if you'd like to do that, or later this week at your convenience.
Sure. It's just, we obviously at this point, we don't know what other districts are doing either. Like, I mean, no district has really landed on a plan. It's just definitely a concern and an anxiety that I think that a lot of parents are sharing throughout the community and communities surrounding us.
Yep. Very fair, Jess. Very fair point. So yeah, let's, this will be taken up and please connect with Dr. Vidala and his team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lord, do we have another?
Yep, our next guest would be Pamela. Pamela can come next.
Yes, good evenings, school committee and other members. Dr. Vidala, thank you. This is Pamela Millman. I'm a resident at 135 Lynn Street in the town of Peabody, city of Peabody. I can't thank you all enough for the amount of time and hard work going into this. That's been said a million times over. We're all learning to fly this plane while it's in the air. And who knows if it's going to crash land somewhere, but hopefully we keep it up. And I appreciate it. There's a couple of things, and I know you can't respond, and I put it out there just for more purposes of understanding and it being put into thought further. I think, Dr. Fadala, it may have been you that had stated something about teachers working outside of their discipline. And my question or my interest lies in, will parents be informed of that at all levels if they have a teacher that is outside of their teaching outside of their discipline, but being used in a capacity that makes sense for the district, and whether parents will be informed? The other issue, a little bit about equity and devices. And I mean, I'm here in Peabody on the other side of town, and as it is, you know, I have pretty shoddy internet, and whether Peabody is going to be creating hotspots like things they've done in other cities. They've created hotspots knowing that a lot of the internet isn't what it should, could, or we want it to be. In particular, if you have multiple children as well as parents that are accessing the internet all simultaneously, albeit remotely from home, and how that would play out and what Peabody's plan is for that. The other interest I have that I'd like the committee to be thinking about, and especially the school, is what the parent training will be looking like for all models, for all levels, what the learning platform is going to be, and how we're going to be providing some sort of training and education, or making it at least accessible for parents. Because, for example, I know Aspen was something that it took me quite a while when my kid was at the Higgins to really know how to successfully use Aspen. And then there are teachers that didn't use it, some that did use it. Whether or not we're going to solidify both the learning platform and other access points, whether we're going to use Zoom, whether we're going to use Google Meets, and what modalities are going to be chosen, and will they provide training, and will they be uniform across the district in order to be more effective for parents, kids, and quite frankly, I believe for staff. I'm impressed. I think nothing has been easy during this. My fingers are crossed that your plans are going to come to fruition very successfully. I think all of us are cautiously optimistic. But I do think there's still many things to be ironed out, that parents don't have all of the information that they need. And lastly, is there a way, and this may be addressed, I came on late, but is there a way that maybe each building principal could do a virtual tour of their building, to similar to what's done in the real estate world for selling houses? And we all know that houses are still flying off the market, especially here in Peabody. Could you do virtual tours of each school building so that parents can make it a better and more informed decision before they make that decision of what it's going to look like for their kids to go back? My understanding, it's near apocalyptic. It's so different. And to get a better look and see of what those things would look like in terms of the classrooms, the arrival, the dismissal, the going to the bathrooms, the going to the nurse, and all of those things, if there could be some sort of virtual tour in each of our buildings that could be made available for parents to either attend and watch, or to watch in some other way via, a closed YouTube or something, so that, again, parents can make more informed decisions. I thank you all for your time and taking on this very daunting task. And there's a lot of promise out there that this will work. So thank you.
Pam, thank you so much. Those were great points. And I think we were all writing some things down, and we'll be taking that under advisement. Thank you very much. Those were excellent. Dr. Lord.
Yep. Next one will be Susie.
Next person.
Susie could come in. That would be great.
Welcome, Susie. Please, if you could just introduce yourself.
Susie, you'll need to unmute yourself to speak.
All right, Dr. Lord, why don't we go to the next person who's interested?
All right, well, I'd like to invite Sean Dowling in then next. Sean will be next. Sean Dowling.
Welcome, Sean. If you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sean Downing. I just want to appreciate all the hard work that's gone into all this. I know every single person is what we're going through and all the obstacles we have. And I agree, and I like that we have the options of how we want to go about making decisions for our children for the next school year. My one concern was the open enrollment and how decisions were made for us without us maybe a talk before that. You know, I know it's hard on everyone. And some of us were found out that our kids had to join another school next year. They couldn't go back to their own school. I think it's hard enough on these kids. And, you know, I wouldn't want to put any more. I'm speaking for all kids affected by this. I know I'm not sure what the percentage is, but I know there's quite a few. And to introduce a whole new school to them in times like this, I just don't agree with. And I don't know if there's room for discussion on that at all.
All right, thank you, Sean. Yeah, Dr. Vidal, I know that some of those decisions have been made or discussed. Can we take that in and maybe have another conversation on that in the very near future? I know we can't do it this evening because it's not on the agenda, but I know that's something that, you know, is going on now during these couple of weeks here. And perhaps on the school committee, we can set that up for another discussion.
Yes, we can absolutely share the policy and talk about the clear procedures that need to be set forth that have been discussed. I know they previously been discussed by the committee, but it'd be helpful to put it out again moving forward.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know we get calls on that. So Sean, can we could take that in and let's set that up for another meeting. We can't discuss it because it's not on the agenda, but I think that needs to be discussed further. So we'll put that on a future agenda. Okay. All right, Dr. Lord.
Yep, next would be John Swanson. John Swanson.
Hey, John, great to have you. Please introduce yourself and you can jump right into it.
Good evening, Dr. Vidala. Welcome aboard, Mayor, members of the school committee. Obviously, thank you very much for all you've been doing for us end of last year and coming into the summer, preparing for the season. My questions are biased. Sorry, John Swanson, I'm from Peabody, 9 Welcome Street. My questions are biased towards the high school, as I have 3 kids going to be in there this coming year. Definitely leaning towards our children being in school as often as possible. My concern is with the remote versus the hybrid model. How much inequity or advantage will be towards the remote learners where they'll have continuity. They'll be remote every day. They'll have access to their teachers in a virtual online environment where those that are hybrid will be in school for a day, not really have interactions with their teachers. They'll be going through their lessons plans and whatnot. And then the next day they're back in. Continuity will be broken up. I think my wife's preference would be something more along the line that Ms. Dunn outlined, where in school for a day and they continue their plan remotely with those teachers. And then they have the Wednesday, Thursday they're back in school. Friday they're again remote, continuing the lessons. I think you're going to have their learning abilities and the access to their resources by not having that continuity through that plan. That's our major concern. And I guess in some fashion, I know you can not answer now. I just want everybody to be aware, and if you guys can validate that we're going back to a grading system, GPAs, and we're not in a pass-fail. Again, I have high school students, very important years for them, and I want to make sure that they're able to get the most they can out of their last remaining years in school. And my last is for both the remote and those in the hybrid testing, what type of parameters we put in line to make sure that those that are testing in school have the same fairness to those that are testing remotely. They're kids. I'm not going to butter it, but there is the ability for those that are testing remotely to have a little bit of an advantage. Google, texting others, getting ahead on those questions. I guess that security would help in our confidence in the plan. Again, thank you very much for everything you guys have done. Appreciate it very much, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Great questions. Dr. Lord.
Yep, our next one will be Jill.
Welcome, Jill. You can please introduce yourself.
Hi, Jill DeHoyos, 75 Wallace Street, Peabody. So I have multiple concerns. My preference is that my child return to school full-time. No hybrid, no remote. Obviously, that's it's a little bit too high of an expectation. However, a few of my main concerns would be the questionnaire that you sent out to families in regard to if we were to go hybrid, would we need childcare? And this is along the same lines as the teacher who spoke previously regarding her children and the type of remote learning, not just childcare, because I am an essential employee. I work full-time, my husband also does. So having an elementary age child home, no matter if there's remote learning of sorts, that child is always going to lean on their parent first. And then in the slides that Dr. Vidala put up about the child care, it said that it would be for a fee. So that is one of my concerns for the families that really do need their children to go back to school due to both parents having to work and being essential and unable to care for or teach their child while they're home. Asking them to pay more money for the child care is a bit concerning to me. So that's one of my concerns. My other question, I know you can't answer it at this point, but last year there were multiple different platforms, which I believe someone else also touched base with that. It was extremely difficult to ask my 9-year-old child to know how to and understand and do it on her own through the 3 or 4 different platforms that she was being asked to do was extremely difficult, and a child is not going to be able to do that without the assistance of their parent who is home with them. So that is another one of my questions / concerns. And then also, like, if because I know everything is fluid and nothing is set in stone, if there is some sort of half-day model, how are the children who are not bused expected to get to and from school? So those are my main concerns. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Those are all legitimate questions, points that you raised. Those will have to be taken up. Dr. Lord, next speaker.
The name is M. Sinises. It's on the next one on the attendance list.
Great, thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please welcome, and just please introduce yourself.
My name is Myra Sinises, and I live on Wildwood Drive in Peabody. And I just first wanted to thank everybody. I've spoken to a few of you and probably harassed a few of you with concerns and questions about the next year. And I wanted to thank the team that's put the plan together. I am part of the minority, or my family is. I am a mom who is immunosuppressed, and I am at high risk. And so for us, remote learning was the only option. And so I greatly appreciate having this option. We recently just had a scare, and my son and myself had to get tested. And to see the stress and the fear in my son, I cried for 2 days waiting for our test results, because I knew that he was upset, because he knew that he could have potentially infected me. And if something were to happen to me, what would that do to him? And so that is my biggest concern. And again, I greatly appreciate the fact that we do have this remote option. I do have a few questions, and I know that it seems like a lot of people have questions, more specific questions about the difference between the remote learning and the hybrid learning. And maybe if it's possible to have maybe more detail when this is sent out, when we need to choose at what the a little bit more detail about what the options would look like. Some of the questions that I had thought of was for remote learners, is this going to be a one teacher that teaches all the classes, or is it going to be multiple teachers? So will it be a math teacher, an English teacher, and such? And also, will he have and I'm thinking about middle school in particular, and will he have the same opportunity to take part in the elective courses as some of the hybrid learners would have? And also, given this is going to be a challenging year for all of us, and I was hoping that perhaps there would be a list of additional resources for kids. So for example, if they're taking Spanish, is there an additional perhaps app or some website that we can use, or resources that we can use and do together with our child to help improve his learning this year? So not something necessarily that's graded, but if there's good apps that help teach Spanish, or good apps that help promote math skills or algebra or geometry or things like that, that we can help incorporate into his learning. And the other suggestions I just had, my company, I'm a scientist, and my company has implemented quite a few things for people to feel safe as they're coming back to work. And I just wanted to make possible suggestions. They've actually installed viral filters in the ventilation system, so to help capture some of these viral particles that may be in the air, and to help mitigate the spread. They've also implemented wiping and sanitizing of areas like railings in the stairwell, doorknobs, conference rooms that are used and such during the day, not just at the end of the day. So perhaps that's something that could be considered as well to help mitigate the spread while the kids are in school. And that was what I had to say. So again, thank you so much. And I do appreciate all the work and effort and helping teach our kids this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dr. Lord?
Yep, our next one is Peggy Kelly. Peggy Kelly will be the next person to come in.
Welcome, Peggy, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Peggy Kelly, and I work at the high school. Forgive me if this is something that the school committee members and you, Mayor Betancourt, and Dr. Vidala already know. But I just found out, or became privy to the information a couple days ago from some friends of mine who were on other school committees, that in terms of students wearing masks to school, the teachers and the administration really have no method of recourse if they refuse to wear a mask and just have a note from one of their parents. Because due to HIPAA laws, we can't ask them why they can't wear a mask. So I was very concerned when I found that out. I didn't have that information when I filled out the survey saying that I would be happy to come back to work. And I just want to make sure that the school committee is aware of that while they're deliberating which plan to choose in response to going back to school. So again, I'm sorry if you already knew that. I just found that out the other day and I thought it was something important for you to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for bringing that forward to us.
Mr.
That's
Mayor, the next
important to
one
know.
is
Dr.
Stephen
Lord?
Zolotas. Stephen Zolotas is the next candidate. There's about 10 more speakers.
Okay, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Zolotas. I live at 10 Mansfield Street in Peabody. First of all, just thank you to everyone for all the work you've done on this. We truly appreciate it. My comment is kind of in line with Mr. Swanson, what a couple other members of the public have discussed, and that is with respect to the synchronous versus the asynchronous learning on the remote days. And I guess what I'd be looking for a little more guidance on or information on is the curriculum the students would be getting, and not necessarily the exact curriculum for that particular class. My daughter will be in kindergarten, which is naturally different than the high school students. But looking to see is cohort A learning the same subjects as cohort B on a Monday, even though one is remote and one is in person. Because my question with that would be if there's any consideration can be given to being able to allow the children who are remote that day to be synchronous with the students who are actually in person. Understand that the teachers may not be able to physically respond to every student that's remote on a synchronous learning platform, but at least if the students were able to stay in the same schedule and the same curriculum as each other on the same days, just to give some continuity between the different cohorts, so that in the event in-person learning can happen, say in January or February or God willing, whenever it may happen, that the students can actually know who each other are, recognize names, faces, etc. So that's my biggest concern, is the ability to try to have the kids synchronous, if at all possible, with the technology we have, to allow them to be able to view the what's going on in the classroom the days they're not there. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for weighing in and commenting. And yep, that'll be taken under advisement, certainly. So thank you for that.
Mr.
Dr.
Mayor,
Lord?
the next candidate is Ms. Barker. Ms. Barker?
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I know you, my name is Amanda Barker and I'm at 21 Mount Pleasant Drive in Peabody. I know you can't answer my question specifically, but I wanted to know whether there have been plans for transportation options, busing for kids who are Peabody kids, but who aren't in the public schools. I'm thinking of some of the Catholic schools I know that get served by the yellow buses, and whether that will still be an option, whether that will be part of the transportation survey that goes out in the next couple of days.
But thank you, Amanda. I'm actually not sure on that one. Dr. Vidal, is that something that would be a part of what will be going out?
So I think that our plans would be for Peabody Public Schools kids and our employees. I think the Catholic schools would be working on their own transportation. And we can work in consultation with St. John's, but I do believe the local Catholic schools are working for their own transportation. So families would have to contact their own school district, their own school, if they're at a private school for private transportation. I don't think that we can use public dollars for kids at private schools.
Yes, that was my understanding as well. Thank you. Dr. Lord, we'll go to the next speaker.
This one's a phone number, no name here, 617-835-3704.
Mr. Mayor, could I on that last, if we can just get some clarification for another meeting? I know it wasn't on the agenda, but I do believe we do provide some transportation for private schools, if you just go back to our transportation department and maybe we can contact that resident. That'd be great. Thank you.
Actually,
Yeah, that's,
just
we
a
can update that. Thank you.
it is a state law. We provide transportation to Peabody residents who attend parochial schools or private schools within the boundaries of Peabody, and we provide it on the same level that that we provide for the public schools. So those restrictions about one student per seat and all of that, those would still carry through on transporting any school child within Peabody.
So just the Peabody schools, just the
Yeah.
ones in the city. So we'll work with St. John's on that elementary school.
Yes.
yeah, let's do that. Let's put that on our next agenda or however, but yeah, I think that's worth
Absolutely.
discussing.
Yeah.
further.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you. Yeah, that's good.
St. John's, Bishop Fenwick, and Christian Covenant.
Okay, Dr. Lord, next speaker.
Again, the next one is a phone number. Don't know who it is. The phone number is 617-835-37.
Hi.
Hi, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Deanna Berganta, and I work at the high school. And I wanted to say that I appreciate everyone's hard work, but I do not think that the plan is safe enough. The Peabody Health Department just announced today online that cases are on the rise. And studies have also recently shown that children are, in fact, major carriers, according to research. And this just came out a couple of days ago. And they do carry it at a higher concentration than adults, so they can spread it more easily. And children tend not to show symptoms, so I don't think their parents would properly be able to monitor this and check for symptoms. And they could spread this to others and then transmit it to their family members. There's also evidence that the virus is airborne, and this comes from the Asia Pacific Journal of Public Health. And it's airborne, and a lack of open air ventilation, so meaning outdoors, is a major compounding factor as the virus remains in the environment. And this leads to, when we're indoors breathing in infected air, it leads to regular, repeated exposure to the virus. Our schools don't have enough ventilation to support our health. An hour at the grocery store is very different from spending an entire day in a school building. And I'm also very concerned about mask breaks and children having to eat lunch in the classrooms. Mask breaks and eating and having to take drinks of water because kids need that, and so do teachers. That would mean increased transmission. And as far as the survey results, it seems to me that the percentage that does want to go back, this is based on a safe return, and the plan does not seem to be safe enough. It's putting our lives in jeopardy, and there could be potential lifelong health risks. Even young people are dying from this. No one knows how they're going to react, and we don't know. We don't have enough information yet to know how this can affect our health long term. So this is very frightening, and I just don't think it's worth the risk because we don't have any guarantee. So that's what I wanted to say. And
Thank you. Thank you for commenting and coming on with us. Thank you. Dr. Lord?
I think we lost Dr. Lord, so I'll jump in. So the next person we have is Julie. And if Julie could just unmute and introduce herself.
Am I unmuted? Hi, my name is Julie Sargent, and I am a teacher at the Higgins Middle School. And I just had a couple of questions that I realize can't be answered this evening, but I would like to raise them anyway. My question is, there will be mask breaks given to students that may be not outside. They may have to be inside a building. And I'm just wondering what type of PPE would be provided to staff that have to monitor those breaks, especially if they're outside or even if they're inside. How would one maintain 6-foot distancing with students outside, especially with children that might be more apt to, after lunch, go hang out with kids, or, it might be hard to keep them socially distant from one another, especially when they don't have a mask on. My next question is about childcare. I am a mom. I have two boys. One is 4, one is 6, that do not attend the Peabody Public Schools. And I do realize that there is some childcare that will be put into place, but will it be at a reasonable cost? As I was never budgeting to have some sort of childcare before. My 6-year-old was going to be heading into first grade, but in his district, it will be a hybrid option as well. While I have to be in the building teaching and my son will be at home, I have no childcare for him. So will this childcare be at a reasonable cost to the staff? And will there be some sort of, as other people have mentioned, some sort of instruction or help using the digital platform that my son will need to use? Thank you for your time. I do believe you all have our best interests at heart. And thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent. Thank you for commenting and bringing those questions forward. Dr. Vidala.
Okay, the next person is Bonnie Anderson. Please unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, so my name is Bonnie Anderson and I live at 281 Western Avenue in Lynn. I teach at the high school in Peabody. And first, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's been working so hard on this, the task force and all of you. I know these are unprecedented times and nobody really has all the answers and we're trying the best we can. So I wanted to thank everybody. I am very concerned about going back to school. I would love to be interacting with my students in person again. That's one of the major things I love about teaching, is to be with my students and see their expressions and to get feedback from them right in person. But I don't feel that we can safely do that at this time because of ventilation issues and all that. And my major concern, one of my major concerns, is if a student or staff member becomes positive with COVID and has to quarantine, that means that the people that have been near that person also should be quarantining for 10 to 14 days. So at the high school, for example, if you had one student become positive, they have 7 teachers, as well as possible other staff members. So now all 7 of those teachers should, hypothetically, according to the rules, be quarantining, and they are teaching other classes of students. If you had 12 kids in a class versus 24 kids in a class, now you've got 12 kids for every one of those 7 teachers. And you can see how this would multiply and it would be like pinball. How are you going to get enough, how is the district, going to get enough substitute teachers to cover all those classes? That's something that needs to be thought about. Now, hopefully nobody becomes positive, but 2% is 2%, or 1.79 is still a percent. It's still a person or a couple of people. And all it's going to take is 1, and it's going to start multiplying. And that's a real concern. So again, I thank you for your time. Please, I know that you have our best interests at heart, but please think about everything before you put us all in the building in person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. The next person to talk is Tammy Burnett. Tammy, please unmute yourself.
Hi there, good evening. Thank you all again, as everyone has appreciated all the work that you're putting into. I know you can't answer this question. It's just something, as the information is put out to the public, I was hoping this would be a little bit more clear. I'm curious if, when selecting the hybrid or the remote option, do either one of those help benefit the students to be able to play sports or participate in a club or an activity at their school? I know that the sports aren't, are beyond everybody's control, and there's other groups that make that decision, and a group of coaches and MIAA and all of that. But I'm just curious if going hybrid or remote would affect any of those decisions from other groups. And another thing I wanted to bring up was a concern that with the cross of students coming and going from the school and dates changing because of holidays, or students being sick and making up a different day, my concern would be to make sure that attendance is clear. I have worked in preschool, in kindergarten, in high school, and I know the importance of attendance when there's fire drills and lockdown drills, and God forbid ever a real emergency. So that would be my concern with the kids coming and going, especially not having a consistent, Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday. So the rotation or switching of days and not making sure the attendance is clear would be something I'd like to make sure is clear when we are making the decision for hybrid or remote as well. That was all I just wanted to bring up.
Thank you, Tammy. And
Thank
I
you.
think during the release of all that information, hopefully that all those questions will be answered in the final plan. Okay, the next person that we have is Danielle Skilling. Danielle, please unmute and introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Danielle Skilling. I live on Aborn Street, and my child is going to be a third grader at the Welch School. And I have a few concerns. And one of them is that previously people have kind of mentioned some of these things, and the response is, yeah, okay, we'll look at it, as opposed to kind of the more in-depth responses to other questions. But has anyone considered the fact that by having children go to a hybrid model, and then for those of us that are working parents that would then have to send them to a secondary program or to, a variety of people for childcare, assuming that we even have those options and aren't going to lose our jobs over this, how many more points of contact that is than actually looking at the percentages of those who are interested in returning to school full-time in person, and though it's students and families and teachers, and those that are interested in remote. And if you actually look at the percentage of teachers willing to return and the percentage of families willing to return, it almost to me seems that it makes much less sense to do a hybrid option than it would do to allow those families and teachers that would like to go to a full-time back in school model to do that, where the children are in the same group for the entire week, and to allow those who are not comfortable with that to do a remote environment. It seems to me that by creating all of these options, well, you can go to school 2 days a week, and then you might be able to go to childcare 3 days a week. And then your parents who have to work to support you can pay extra for you to go to a program where you're not going to be getting, your educational needs met, is actually creating a much more hazardous environment for the people who are concerned about it than having the children either go fully remote or fully in person. And I feel like, based on the comments, the survey results and that type of thing, that there are a lot of us in that position who really do feel that this has an impact. And I'm not discrediting those who have concerns and don't want to go back into the building at all. But I think if you look at your survey results and you look at the input from the variety of, community members, teachers, etc., I think you said you had 80% of the teachers were willing to go back, and 70% of the families were willing to go back in person. You have a delta of about 10 between the two groups that could probably be managed much more easily than, you either give someone a fully online option or a hybrid option, which everyone keeps calling, in person, which it's really not. It's 2 days. It's untenable for a significant portion of the population of the city that has students in school. And I truly think that, you know, again, it creates so many more touch points and contacts for those who are concerned. And I think that we're making some of these decisions based on fear and being afraid to kind of speak up. And I think that actually going to school and being in the same group of people 5 days a week is significantly safer than going to school 2 days a week, maybe going to your grandparents and exposing them for 1 or 2 days a week, and then having to go to, you know, an additional program. So I just think that it makes absolutely no sense. And I really hope that some more thought is put into what it looks like. Somewhere around 70% of the families responding to the survey felt was appropriate, as opposed to catering to only the 20 to 30% that felt differently. I think that going to either full-time or full online remote addresses much more of the needs and concerns based on the results of the survey and the ability to contain contacts than a hybrid, which is really not a solution for anybody, and a remote, which caters to the smallest percentage of the respondents and members of the community. So that's my concerns, and I hope that somebody actually looks at, you know, those of us that have those concerns and take it seriously, as opposed to dismissing us as people who just want to throw our kids to the wolves and let them die, which is kind of what a lot of the responses from the community have been to those of us that are okay with our kids going back to school. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Okay, next we have someone on a cell phone. It's a Galaxy A10e. Please unmute and state your name. Okay, I'm going to go to the next person. Okay, next up we have Lenny Parsons. Please unmute and identify.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Lenny, you're on.
My name is Lenny Parsons. I live at 174 Lake Street. I have two little ones at the McCarthy. And some of my concerns that last caller echoed immensely. The hybrid to me is just kind of mixing everything together. And, you know, I'm paying my taxes to send my kids to school full time. So to have to do 2 days a week, and then 2 days a week I have to find childcare, send them to the YMCA, send them to FKO. It's just trying to find too many pieces to a puzzle to fit in. So like me and my wife are both essential workers. We work full time. So it would be so much easier if we just knew, you know, listen, they're going to be in school 5 days a week, or they're going to remote 5 days a week. So we can find one consistent thread to pull everything together. But to do the hybrid, to me, is just too many moving parts. I liked what Mr. Hackman said earlier in the phone call about, you know, the schools, the facilities are open 24 hours. Not that we would do night school, but we could start the kids at 7 and, you know, do 4 hours of school, no recess, they're home for lunch, and then you could start the next group right after that for 4 hours of straight school. You know, just my opinion. You know, I'm part of a big McCarthy group. We all talk, and we're all on the same page. You know, get the kids back to school full time. The kids are playing baseball. The girls are playing softball. So I think having everyone go to the same place 5 days a week would be great. That's all I have for now. Thanks for everything you guys are doing. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Thank you for speaking tonight. Dr. Vidala, next speaker, please. I think you're muted, Dr. Vidala.
We have Julie DuPont. Julie, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Julie DuPont. I live on 116 Lynn Street in Peabody. Thank you, Mayor Betancourt, Dr. Vadela, and everyone else for everything you've all been doing for our kids. I feel I have two children, twins, 7-year-old, that are going into second grade this coming year. I feel the hybrid model is probably the best thing we can do, as in-person learning full-time would not be the safest option, especially since one of my children is immunocompromised and both of my children have ADHD and one is on a 504 plan. And that's my biggest concern, especially with the hybrid model you came out with, the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, off Wednesday. I feel that the children, honestly, safety-wise, would be best with a Monday, Tuesday, off Wednesday, in school Thursday, Friday. I just feel if you put the kids all together on different days and then have one day of cleaning, it kind of doesn't make sense. There's no real splitting the children. You have one group on Mondays, the next group on Tuesdays, but there's no real cleaning, especially at the South School, where I will say that my children who were in first grade last year had some fantastic teachers and their Padlets were great and their remote learning was fantastic. But I feel with just 2 janitors, it's not enough staff to make sure the school is cleaned in between the cohorts. And, you know, you have one group going 2 different days. I just feel if you put the kids back-to-back days, I know 5 days off is a lot of days off, but with remote learning, I really think that the kids would, it would be the safest for all the kids. Honestly, I reached out to the principal of the South School, who is fantastic and has helped me make decisions, you know, for my kids in the best interest. We will support whatever everyone decides to do, but that's just my opinion. So thank you all. And that's all.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for calling in and speaking on your concerns. Dr.
And
Vidala, do we have any more speakers?
That's all the hands we have raised. So we have, looks like we have no more people who want to participate in public participation.
I just wanted to check, I've got a couple text messages. Are we offline right now? Josiah, are we okay with PAT, or are we having some trouble?
We're back on TV now.
Okay. We're
We're
back on?
Yeah, I'm told it's been fixed.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Josiah. All right, we'll move forward with the agenda. We don't have any written communications today, so we'll go to subcommittee reports. Education subcommittee report, anything new, Mr. Hockman?
No, Mr. Mayor, nothing there, but if we could retake up that having the school committee having live meetings, I don't know if this would be an appropriate time or if you wanted to take it up under new business or whatever your pleasure.
Yeah, why don't we take it under new business? We'll go through the subcommittees and then take it up at that time.
In that case, no report at this time.
Thank you. Finance, Mrs. Carpenter?
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay, school safety, Mr. Olympio?
Nothing new to report at this time.
Athletics and wellness, Mr.
Yeah, the only
Mr.
report,
Hockman?
yeah, sorry, the only report that I have is that MIAA pushed back all fall sports to, I believe, at least September 14th. No captain's practices or anything of that sort, and we'll keep the public updated on those that information as it comes in.
Thank you. Qualities and standards, Mrs. Dunn?
Nothing to report at this time. However, we have a tentative date for an upcoming meeting of August 18th.
Great, thank you. Parent Advisory Board and Student Advisory Board, Mrs. Dunn, anything to report?
Not at this time.
Building and Grounds, Mr. Amico?
Nothing to report at this time.
Special Education Parent Advisory Board, Mr. Olympio?
Nothing new to report, but I would ask Dr. Vidala, when we do go back into school,
for my CPAB meetings, would that be a possibility of having those in person if we choose to do that? How would that fit under this plan?
Yes, I think we would check with the public health department, and as long as we follow their guidelines,
Okay.
I think that we would be able to have in-person meetings as long as, we had the appropriate space and the distancing requirements. And I'd be happy to join some of those meetings as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. City Council and Legislative Delegation, Mr. Arnottis.
Nothing new to report.
All right, thank you. So under new business, why don't we go first to the listed item? Mrs. Dunn, I'll turn it over to you. There was an item you brought forward for a vote, I believe.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm bringing forward to all of you this evening is a situation that exists with the Mass Association of School Committees. As you know, each year there are offices elected for the Board of Directors of MASC. And this year, due to current circumstances, there was no candidate for the president-elect position. In order to be able to fill that position, anyone who wanted to run needed to submit a request to be nominated from the floor at the convention in the conference in November. And there will be a conference. It will probably be virtual, but there will be a delegate assembly, at which time a vote would be taken. In order to be on the ballot for that vote, the potential candidates need to have nominations from at least 5 school committees. So tonight I'm bringing forward the names of 2 candidates who would like to run from the floor in November for the position of president-elect. And I would be seeking your support in nominating these 2 individuals. The first individual running is Deb Davis. Deb is currently the current president of Mass Association of School Committees. And she would like to run for the president-elect position in the hopes that she would at some point be able to have a year where she is able to accomplish much of what her agenda originally was. A lot was put aside because of the COVID pandemic. She is a 23-year member of the Northeast Metropolitan Vocational Technical School Committee. She has been very involved with MASC conferences over the past years. She is the representative to the Delegate Assembly. She currently serves on the National School Board Association as well. And she was originally elected chair of the Vocational Division, which is Division 8. She served as vice chair and then secretary. And she's worked hard on a lot of the committees on MASC. She's also a graduate of Northeast Metro Tech. The other candidate is Andrea Wadsworth. Andrea is a school committee member in the town of Lee. She's actually chair of her school committee. She's been a member for 9 years. She's currently serving as the Division 6 chair of the MASC. She is a member of the Digital Learning Advisory Commission for the DESC. She's on the Massachusetts Status of Women Commissioner. And she has just moved from being an assistant superintendent in one school district way out west in the Berkshires. And she is now currently in her first month as the Berkshire Community College Vice President of Administration and Finance. I have the privilege of working with both of these women and knowing them, and I can assure you that either one will be a wonderful addition to the executive board of MASC. And we'd just like to ask, and we'll make a motion that the Peabody School Committee support the nomination of Deborah Davis and support the nomination of Andrea Wadsworth as candidates for president-elect for MASC. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Is there any discussion?
And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. It's an unusual occurrence.
Great. Any comments or questions for Mrs. Dunn? All right, we'll move forward then with the roll call vote.
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympio,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. And I did want to go back to Mr. Hockman's quick question or issue that was brought up earlier. I can say that I know Mr. Rosignol, City Council President, has been meeting with Allison Danforth, our city clerk, as well as Sharon Cameron from our excellent health director, to try to come up with a way for them, the city council, to start resuming their meetings at the Wigan Auditorium, and to come up with a plan for that. And so I think, Mr. Hockman, you're kind of thinking along the same lines as starting to bring us together to have these meetings. So I wanted to turn it over to you if you wanted to make a vote. I do definitely would want to bring in Sharon Cameron at some point, but I think I know the city council is doing it. I think we should probably be looking at that as well.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You cut out a little bit, or I don't know if it was my connection or your connection, so I didn't hear everything that you said, but I think I got the gist of it. So I can report that I did speak to Sharon Cameron last week on the subject. It's the second time I've spoken to her on this subject since the beginning of July. I've talked to the mayor about this a couple of times. I think Dr. Vidala about it a couple of times as well. Ms. Cameron tells me that she's comfortable with our committee and administrators who regularly attend our meetings to meet live and in person at the Higgins Library. She did express some concerns about having the public appear at our meetings, not so much as she was looking to exclude public from attending, but she was concerned with if, like for a meeting like tonight, a group got beyond 25, what mechanism or protocol would we put in place to have people attend live and have people not, be able to come into the library. She did also recommend, and I would agree, that we continue broadcasting live on Facebook. We continue broadcasting live on PATV, allowing for public participation remotely. But I just think it's under the environment that we live in now, with the great work that's been done by a tremendous amount of people in terms of getting our COVID numbers under control. A lot of great, people like Sharon and like Mayor Betancourt with his leadership. I just think it's somewhat disingenuous of us to ask for people who work for the Peabody Public School Department to come back to work in a couple of weeks, and we're sitting in our living rooms or home offices or real offices for some of us. So I think it's safe for us to go back. We would need to maintain social distancing. Ms. Cameron would, recommends that. We can do that very easily in the library. There's plenty of room for us to spread out. We'd need to wear masks, and I think we should. I don't think we need any other PPE other than that. So with that, I'll make a motion that beginning August 18th, which I think is our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting, and all budget meetings, and I'm expecting that we're going to have some budget meetings coming up to be conducted in person, either at the Higgins Middle School Library or some other location designated by the superintendent. So moved.
I'll second that motion.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hockman. So a motion was made by Mr. Hockman and was seconded by Mrs. Dunn. I'd open that up for discussion. Mrs. Dunn, I'll go to you first.
Thank you. I do believe we should go back. We've been working through the pandemic all this time, and we've got all kinds of lessons learned. We have a very small number of people for our committee and our administrators who would be meeting in person. The Higgins Library is perfectly suited for our meetings. It's already set up for the transmission of broadcast of the meetings. And just so you all know, this has been going on the whole time with the Essex North Shore agricultural and technical schools, which I'm the PBD representative of. And what they have done, and it's absolutely something we could do as well. That's a 20-member board. So to limit the number of people present, the 3 officers, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, I'm the secretary, the 3 agricultural representatives, which brings us now to 6 members, the superintendent, the principal, the business manager, and the IT director is right there on site. We meet, and that meeting is broadcast out, and the remaining members appear on Zoom. And we work together. They appear on the large screen. We appear on their screen. There is a contact number for members of the public to call in for public participation. And if people do that, the chair addresses them. It's really seamless and it works well. And I think that with the size of our committee, we're in a perfect position to just do that. I can understand having to limit the physical attendance at our meetings, but being able to broadcast our meetings just as we are now and allow members of the public to call in during public participation would give us the benefit of meeting in person, but having the open transparency that we've worked so hard to create with our meetings. So I support this. I think we need to do it. I also think that in light of the fact that a lot of various activities are opening up through the governor's directives and through working with public health, that we can do this. We've got a great crew here in PBD as it is. I have great faith with Sharon Cameron. If we were not following through on the appropriate protocols, I would trust that she would give us good advice on how to do this. And I think that if we're going to live with COVID, we just need to live with it and try to get back to some of the basics that we have in place.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Would anybody else like to comment on the motion that's been made? Mr. Amico?
Thank you. Through the chair of the committee. Yes, I agree we should be meeting in person. I do have reservations about how many people we could allow coming in regards to participation. And I think this is where an issue could arise. I know it's happened at city council where they had their meetings and then there was a limit on how many people could show up to ask questions or take part in the meeting. And some people felt like people weren't being heard or weren't being represented because they could not be part of the meeting. So I think I'm certainly going to support this, but I would hope that we meeting. I mean, we're doing this in good intentions and the fact that it's the right thing to do. But I think the public needs to know that there will be restrictions, and if there's an issue with that, then we'd have to go. I would say go back to remote learning. Remote learning, remote meetings. I'll yield. It's been a long night.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Any other comments from any committee members? Mr. Arnottis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, Mr. Amico, I consider every meeting we have a learning experience here. So I do think remote learning in some capacity. But I'm completely in favor of our group going back. I think that's important. And more seriously, to your point, I do think we should tailor it that, it's kind of our core committee, Dr. Vidala and his team going back. And if anyone wants to participate, we can arrange that with PATV in some capacity to allow folks to participate either by video or by phone, however we want to do that. I think it would be best to, as you said, we don't want to have, someone at the door in some capacity. So if we can completely have public participation rather stay remote and then we go back and people can see us, and we don't have dogs joining the conversation as we've had kind of occasionally here. I think we'll be good to go. And Brandy, it's you and me. We're the only ones who get in trouble. So I think we're good to go on that, and I'll support the motion, and we'll go for that. But I hope, Mr. Hockman, is that your intention, that it's kind of our core group going back, or is this, are we playing a numbers situation?
No. I'm looking at our core group. I did have some thoughts about a officer of each of the bargaining units, if they chose to join us. Like a lot of the speakers tonight, a lot of the attendees were members of bargaining units. I mean, they have representation, and if they had an issue to raise, I think they could do that through their leadership. And I'd be comfortable with, a member, an officer of each of those bargaining units joining us. But, if we kept it with just us and had public participation completely remote, that's fine by me too.
Okay.
Well, thank you both. Any other comments from any members?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. So I am in favor of us meeting together in person. I think we can all figure it out. We've all been going to the grocery stores, and some of us to a restaurant, and so graduation was successful. The one thing that I'm concerned about, and I would like to ask Sharon Cameron, is the location of our meeting. A lot of the guidelines in the field that I'm in limit any type of visitors to buildings for cross-contamination and the cleaning process and those type of things. So I would not want any of us to infect or cause any issues within the school building. So I just want to get clarification as to if that's the best location for us to be in, just because of the guidelines that I follow in the school field that I'm in. It limits, there is nobody allowed in the building other than the children. So if we could just get clarification on a location, I would feel a little bit more comfortable.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. That makes sense. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Roll call vote, please, Mrs. Harris.
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Hockman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympia,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the agenda. I know we covered a lot of ground today. I know we got some more very important meetings, more important discussions and votes ahead of us. I appreciate everybody's hard work in making this night happen. And we will continue the work ahead of us. Thank you, Dr. Vidala and your team. Thank you to everybody who called in today and expressed their opinion. I hope, I know I've received a number of messages. I think all of the committee members have as well. That's very helpful to hear from everybody as to what your thoughts are. So please keep those opinions coming, and we'll move forward. So our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, August 18th, and we'll handle the regular agenda in the typical course. So thank you, everyone, and move to adjourn. All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.